So Doug, who are we missing?
We actually have 3 absences tonight, so we're going to need to wait for for everyone else for quorum.
That's what I figured. We got a minute to go here anyway.
Yeah, got a couple more joining here.
Yeah, I think I've got it working now.
Yes.
It took a minute.
Another small agenda tonight, as you can all see.
Yeah, thanks for piling on, Chair.
I've said this already, but for those joining, the default tonight is that you will be on mute as you join the meeting, and then we just ask that you unmute as your item comes up or as you would like to speak. It should just help. We have a large meeting like this, it should help with feedback and things like that.
And who are the 3 that we are? I know Patrick.
Alder Goforth and Corrine Fallett as well are unable to join. So we're waiting on Susan and Brian.
Okay. Brian is on. He's got his iPhone.
Yep, Doug, I'm here. I'll be switching over here soon.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed that.
So we're waiting for Ms. Fox.
Yes, I know she's out of town, but she said she has good connection and plans to join.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you.
It's too thick for one meeting.
And I think we have quorum, so I think we are ready to go.
Okay, great. I'd like to call the meeting to order. The City of Winona Plan Commission, Monday, June 14th, 2021. Could you please call the roll, Doug?
Chair Moore,
Here?
Mr. Holmquist,
Here.
Mr. Stein,
Here.
Ms. Fox,
Here.
Mr. Homberg,
Here.
Alder Goforth, Ms. Fallett, and Mr. DePula are excused.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from May 24th?
Move approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any corrections, changes, additions to the minutes from the 24th? Chris?
Yes, on page 3, Doug, like the 3rd paragraph down where there's discussions about parking, I think we should add, there was something that both Mr. Holmquist and I talked about during this, was that we had questioned some of the parking numbers they came up with because there was no accounting for any parking for the live component of the work-live units. And I think that's a key item that we still need to reconcile.
I will add a sentence in for that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other changes, corrections, or additions to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ms. Carey. I understand we have a few appearances this evening. One I'm aware of is David Stefan. Is that correct, Doug? David,
Yes.
welcome
Hello,
back.
everybody.
Welcome back. You're becoming a regular.
I know you guys won't be able to shake me now.
Go right ahead.
All right. Well, I just wanted to join the meeting tonight in support of the WPS plan.
Okay.
Oh, keep going. Guys, hear me okay?
Yep. Yep, you're in the appearance section, so
right.
this is fine.
All right, wonderful. Yeah, I just wanted to be here to show One City support for the plan proposed by WPS for the lot rearrangement and the CSM proposed.
Okay. Is that it? Is there anything else that you want to say about that?
Well, one of the things that I noticed in the report is it's for ease of determining street maintenance, and I also wanted to add that for us, we also feel like it's a safety measure as well. We feel like our campus will be safer if we direct the traffic to one in and out intersection for One City, and then WPS uses different access points off Broadway. So for us, it's more than just ease of administration, but for us, it's also a safety issue.
Okay.
And that's all I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you.
This is Jared Smith, One City's attorney, if I may speak as well.
Sure.
Thank you. I know tonight we're looking at the CSM proposed by WPS, and that is to change the boundary lines between the Nordby building parcel and the remainder of the WPS campus. And we would really like to focus on the boundary line change, that this is simply altering where the lot lines fall. And One City is going to and prepared to address the issue of access with our submittals for the July 12th Plan Commission meeting. We'd like to focus tonight on the CSM and that in and of itself is maybe a first step towards the ultimate hope that the Plan Commission will accept what we're proposing for access down the road, but really is not directly related to the access issue, since there's other current access that's not going to be changed by the recording of a new CSM. So that's all I have to add right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug, do we have anybody else here to appear this evening?
Not that I'm aware of that are not associated with an application.
Okay. Anybody else here this evening to appear that are not associated with an application? Okay. Then we'll close the appearance section. Thank you, Jared. We'll close the appearance section and move on to number 5, unfinished business. 5A, public hearing on the request by the Wisconsin Physician Services, WPS, for the approval of revisions to lots 1 and 2 of certified survey map 15671 and lot 3 of certified survey map 10267 at 1707 West Broadway, case number 2-013-2021. I assume, Rob?
I'll be recusing myself. I don't know how that affects action.
I believe because we're looking for a recommendation rather than a formal action, that we should be okay even if we're short. But I can be corrected if I'm mistaken.
Yeah, I believe that's correct as well. Thank you, and thank you, Rob, for doing that. I'm assuming, Ken, that you're here representing WPS for this public hearing, or at least to kick it off.
I am here. I'm representing WPS. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can, thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, we just want to present the CSM that we have outlined that moves the property line over from the center of the road over to the west side of the road to give One City full control of that roadway and the maintenance and everything like that on it. It also gives them access to a public right of way.
Okay. Great. And is there anybody else here from WPS that wanted to speak on this as well before, or anyone outside of WPS that wanted to speak on this that hasn't already, as it relates to, since it is a public hearing, this would be the time to speak up.
I see Brian Glosh on the line, who prepared the document from AS.
Okay. Brian, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Ken summed it up well, just kind of what the intent was. Just redividing the lots again to simplify maintenance costs and give One City the full width of the roadway through that area. And like Ken had mentioned, access to West Broadway from their site.
Okay. Great, thank you. Anybody else, the public hearing portion of this particular item? Okay, that being the case, we'll close the public hearing and we'll move on to 5B, consideration of action on the request by WPS for approval of revisions of lots 1 and 2 certified survey map 15671 and lot 3 of certified survey map 10267 at 1707 West Broadway, case number 2-013-2021. Doug?
Thank you. So just as way of an update for the commission, this did, as required, go to the Public Works Committee on June 2nd, and they recommended approval as presented. The staff report lays out kind of the steps here, as well as a couple of the key points. You'll also find in the packet attachment 1. Via did take a look at this. We had a surveyor check through the document, and there is a letter included in the packet with suggested edits, mostly just small copy edits and things like that it is recommended can be approved administratively and worked on with the applicant. I also did include a little bit of information based upon the past Plan Commission discussion about approvals and that of the original CSM, more as a way of reference, but just so that they were included, and they're also included as attachment 1. So with that, staff recommendation is that the Plan Commission recommend approval to the Monona City Council with conditions as stated. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Chris, would you like to start us off, please?
Certainly. You can hear me, right?
Well, I can.
Great. Okay, thanks. Certainly no issues with the CSM. It makes a lot of sense. I did have one question, then again a comment. The question would be to Brian. You've, I assume, read all of Veerbecker's comments. You have no issues with that?
I have not seen the comments yet at this point.
Okay. I mean, if there was something that you vehemently disagreed with, now would be the time to talk about it. Otherwise, it's just up to you, work with city staff to go through them all.
Yeah, and based on the comments that Doug had, or what Doug had said, I don't think there's anything that will be of anything, that'll be stopping.
Okay, thank you. And then my comment will go back to what I know nobody on here wants to hear about, but it would be maintaining that joint access easement. So I'm going to give just a brief history of this parcel. It was around 20 years ago when WPS came to the city and wanted to do this. And the primary reason at the time was to abandon Angle Street. Angle Street, you can see the easement ran through their property at an angle. They owned the property on both sides of Angle. And what they came up with was a proposal for the city for a couple things: to put the on-site circulation to handle the traffic coming from these parcels, and the fact that at least back then, when they had their shift changes, both the Bridge Road and the Gisholt Drive stoplights would get overloaded. So they asked the city, and we worked with WPS and Dane County to put a third access directly out to Broadway with a stoplight to help with all that traffic flow. In return, the city had asked that there's a joint access easement between all these lots so that all the things that were done would still be able to flow if by chance WPS ever sold one of these lots. At the time when the CSM was recorded, it didn't matter. They owned all the property. They're not going to keep their own buildings from driving on their roads. But the reason it was done 20 years ago was so that if a lot was ever sold, at the time, we were told it was done for accounting reasons, keep the separate parcels, which is great. And selling off a parcel is great. But I think the whole principle of it is to have reasonable access to all the parcels and be able to have multiple ingress and egress points. Now, I agree with one city school. They can direct all their people, come in one entrance and one exit. They can ask them to do that. But if we give up the joint access easements, then basically these properties can be blocked off from one another. And I don't think that behooves even WPS, to be quite honest, to not be able to use that Bridge Road access. So I think it's important that we maintain the requirement for joint access agreement between the parcels that was placed on this 20 years ago, give or take, whenever it was done. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Susan Fox?
Well, yeah, I think it makes sense to make the CSM change. And as far as the joint access agreement, I'm guessing, I guess I'm wondering what's the reluctance to do those? I mean, why is there? Or, I mean, I understood you to say that one city will be coming forward with a proposal about access at a later date, but I'm not understanding why there's an interest in avoiding the joint access easements at this point. Can someone address that, or?
Yeah. Ken or Brian address that?
I think,
Yeah, I can address that. The reciprocal access agreement, after reading through it, I refreshed myself with it today, and basically it just states that maintaining access to all 4 lots of the CSM 10267 throughout, maintain access throughout the entire parcel along Ring Road. So each one of those parcels, the remaining parcels, would still have access to West Broadway, in which, in this case, even with closing, even if that were to be the case where the east portion of Ring Road and the vacated Engle Street were completely given to one city, the other 3 remaining lots would still have direct access to West Broadway Street, which, after reading it, was kind of the basis, from my understanding, of what that document was about.
Right, but that said, then what's the reason for not wanting the easement with the one city owned piece? I mean, what's the main reason for wanting to change it?
This is Smith for One City again. One City is fully prepared to address all of these comments and concerns with our July 12th hearing on the overall project plan for the site, including access, including site plans. Our view right now is we're looking at the CSM, which is changing lot lines between the 2 properties. And with the lot line change, that doesn't impact anything that's happened before.
Right.
And with
Right,
the easement that's out there, what that is, it's recorded against the property. And this, the approval of a CSM does not change what's been recorded in the past.
Okay, right.
Right now we're focusing on that. In terms of just generally addressing your comment, we certainly have a lot more that we just submitted today, actually prepared, went through a TIA, really worked with our consultants to get information to the Plan Commission to fully consider the entire issue on both sides. But as a general overview, it's really about the site security and access and traffic flow and safety to students, where there's not going to be confusing traffic about where are people entering, where are people exiting, how will traffic flow, how can we minimize right or left turns, how can we keep the young small bodies that are going to be commuting from bus stops off of West Broadway to our campus safe from commuting traffic that might not be keeping that in mind. So it's really about safety, it's about security of the campus, it's about control over of One City's campus. And what you'll see in the submissions later is the minimal impact, if any, that it's going to have on the overall operation of West Broadway. But again, I would like our TIA and our submissions to speak for themselves.
Right. Okay.
On that.
That's helpful though. Thank you. So in that case, I don't have any concerns with the CSM change.
Yeah, thank you. Brian?
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Wait, I can, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any issues with the CSM overall. And it sounds like there's some additional details coming regarding the joint access points. The reason why the joint access, or at least some type of access point, even if it's something that temporarily is in place, meaning like, I don't know, there's some temporary barrier that helps people know where to enter and exit. But I remember us having the conversation regarding overflow parking or larger events that are happening at one city and the potential of a shared parking agreement for be able to have overflow with WPS. If that's the case, and we've already trained everybody to enter one way and we close off inner parcel access, you then have a new problem. So I have no issue with the current CSM. I'm just kind of foreshadowing the connection to the one city street proposal and signage and other aspects with the additional layer of a potential shared access or a shared parking agreement for special events. So not really a question, more of a big statement. And then that's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Anything else from Plan Commission members this evening on the CSM? Chris?
Yeah, I can't read my own notes. I do have another question, Brian. At the CSM up on the Bridge Road end, it shows just calls the little stub going over to DiMaggio West Broadway, which I know it's not West Broadway. I don't know if that's considered West Broadway frontage. And then it doesn't say anything about Engle Street. And I know that's Engle Street in front of the restaurant.
I believe it's the West Broadway frontage, and then connects to, that is Bridge Street.
Bridge Road, yes.
Yeah.
But then I think there should be talk it over with Veerbecker and Doug when you finish it, but it is actually Engle Street when you go to the west of Bridge Road. That's in front of that restaurant.
Okay.
So that should probably be called as Engle Street. And then instead of saying West Broadway, it should probably just be West Broadway frontage. I think it's referred to as West Broadway frontage road.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from Plan members? Do I have a recommendation or a motion for a recommendation to the City Council? Chris?
I move we recommend the City Council adopt this CSM with conditions 1 and 2 as written by staff, and condition 3 that we recommend that the applicant maintain the cross access easements between all parcels.
Okay, I have a recommendation, motion. Do I have a second?
This is Brian, I'll second.
I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Right, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to 5C, public hearing on the request of Floor & Decor Outlets of America LLC, represented by CenterPoint Integrated Solutions LLC, for approval of a zoning permit for a new use at 2101 West Broadway, case number 2-012-2021. Who is here from Floor & Decor?
That would be me, Daniel Kelly. I believe I'm also the applicant.
Great. Do you want to go ahead? This is the public hearing. You get to speak first.
Sure, yeah, I was gonna just,
Welcome.
if I could share my screen possibly.
Yes, you should have sharing permissions to do so.
Can you all see that?
We can.
Yes.
Awesome. So I was just gonna walk through some of the changes we made after our workshop hearing, kind of discuss those with the group. So I guess to start, one of the main comments was to add bollards along the front of the building as well as protection. So as you can see here on our site plan, we have made the notes to add bollards along the frontage. And another big point was to repave the back drive aisle because it was in poor condition.
You know, I don't know if other people are having a hard time hearing, but you're kind of muffled. I don't know if you can get closer to your microphone or for some other, or other members having a hard time hearing?
Yeah.
Yep, it's muffled here too.
Okay. How about now? Is it any better now?
Better. Much
All right.
better. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So I don't know if you heard the first part, but I was just going to walk through some of the changes we made based on our workshop hearing we had on May 10th. We kind of implemented all of the changes that were suggested, but I wanted to just go through those on the site plan. So the first change we implemented was to add bollards along the front of the building as building protection where we have a flush curb. So if you see the notes on the site plan, we have added those along the front. Another main point that we had was to repave the back drive aisle because its current condition is very rough. So we added a note to repave the area along the loading dock to the side along the back of the building as well. And we also are going to mill and overlay the whole parking lot out front, also due to its existing poor condition. Another main point from the workshop was to add some trees in front along the customer pickup area, which we had discussed. So if I pull up the landscaping plan, we have added some trees in the island out front. And another comment was the temperature on our photometric plans to add a temperature map. So if you could see on the packet we submitted, we have added the temperature map in the bottom right for the photometric plan. In addition to that, on our elevations, we have added brick along the two front towers in the vestibule. So if you look on the elevation we submitted, both these towers have brick, two tones of brick along the front. In addition to that, we also continued the three color scheme, the banded color scheme along the back facade. In the past, we had just the amazing gray. Now we have the three tones. Other than that, the biggest thing was we added a note on our landscape plan to replace all dead trees and stumps, as well as the cart corrals up front, because those were in poor condition. Those were the main changes to our site plan. I think we addressed all of the commission's concerns in our workshop, but we are open to any questions.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone here from representing Floor and Decor besides yourself or anyone else outside of Floor Decor that wishes to speak on this proposal during the public hearing portion?
Parker Lang with Centerpoint. I don't have anything to add. I think Danny did a nice job of covering all the changes we made since the last time we met with you all.
Okay.
And this is Aaron Douglas. I'm with Floor and Decor, but similar to Parker, nothing to add to what Daniel shared.
Okay. Thank you. That being the case, we'll close the public hearing portion of this and move to 5D, which is consideration of action on the request by Floor Decor Outlets of America, LLC, represented by Centerpoint Integrated Solutions, LLC, for approval of a zoning permit for new use at 2101 West Broadway, case number 2-012-2021. Doug?
Thank you. Could I just ask Daniel first to stop the screen share so we can get everyone back on the same? That would be great.
Absolutely. Let's see here.
I think it's an option at the top. There you go. Perfect.
Sorry about that.
Thanks. So from a staff report perspective, the request here is a zoning permit request for a new use. Also, the store has been vacant for more than 6 months. So both requirements would necessitate the new use. This follows on from a May 10th pre-hearing. The applicant's done a nice job of outlining the changes that were made. A couple items in reviewing the plans that I did just want to bring to the attention of the commission. They're listed at outdoor storage lockers on the, I believe, on the northern face of the building along the front. Just wanted to check. I know there's some propane storage, so I just didn't know if they were sort of public facing, if they're more customer pickup or something like that, or if they are more functional in their purpose. And another recommendation or maybe discussion point for the commission was the potential of adding conduit for electric vehicle charging. I know that has come up in the past, and obviously with the work that's proposed to the parking area in front, it may be an option as something to consider. So the changes have already been mentioned that have been acted upon since the May 10th meeting. Again, Via-Beca did conduct an engineering review for this, and their comments are included in attachment 2. And that is included as one of the conditions of approval that suggested that these edits sort of be made and reviewed at a staff level. Additionally, I did just want to call out a comment from the Public Works Director just about site signage, operational stop signs, things like that are missing from the current use. So that's another recommendation that they be addressed in coordination with the Public Works Department. So with that, staff recommendation is approval with the finding of fact and conditions of approval as listed. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Rob, would you like to start us out?
Sure. I don't have a whole lot to add. I think you've done a really good job at addressing a lot of the comments that we had made before. I think this is going to be the facelift that you're giving this is really going to do a lot for that whole commercial area. As far as some of the items that were brought up, landscaping was brought up as the points don't meet the requirement based on the city ordinance. That said, I do think that you've done a really nice job of kind of filling in a lot of those gaps. There could be more points if more shrubs and things were landscaped in those islands, but a lot of times what I found is in those islands, they don't get the maintenance that they should if they are landscaped fully. So I appreciate that you're filling those in with sods. Honestly, it looks reasonable to me. So yeah, so I don't have a lot of criticism. It looks like you've addressed a lot of the things that we talked about.
Thank you, Rob. Chris?
Thanks. I agree with Rob. This is going to be a nice upgrade to this entire area, the center, and it'll be a start. You know, when I look at it, I can always find more areas. I think, oh, we could use a tree here or something. But I believe the reason Rob feels it looks good, and we all do, is you've undersold yourself. I went out there today and I counted the existing trees, which we do give credit for, and I counted 14 trees that you've agreed, if they're not right, to replace. And then you've got to remember that screening wall you have for your loading dock, which is critical. And there's 33 trees there. We usually give 30 points for a small evergreen, but these are fully mature ones, so they're certainly worth 50 points. You go through those, you got another 23, 50 points. And I saw at least 8 shrubs along, what would that be, Gisholt, where those would be at least 30 pointers. So I look at all that, you got another 2,400 points there you didn't give yourself. So if you add it all up, you've hit our standard. So I would even recommend, Doug, we get rid of the finding of fact, but just let the record show that the applicant has hit our point standard. And I commend you for that. I know we asked for a lot of different things, but this brings it up to current standards. Now, sometimes when we have an old site, we bring it up slowly, but with such a major use going here, I think it's fabulous to bring it up like that. I do want to ask the questions that Doug asked. The first one would be, what are outdoor storage lockers?
Those outdoor storage lockers are just for the propane that we use to operate our forklifts. So they're not for sale. They're not used for anything other than our operational forklifts.
Are you taking down that brick screening wall, or are you leaving it?
I believe we are replacing.
That's an existing brick screening wall. It's like an outdoor storage area right now. It would seem that would be reasonable to leave that in place and screen that if you're going to have just that open mesh lockup for propane tags.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely something we will take into consideration.
It's looking at the plan, I can't tell. It doesn't really show a wall there, but that's what's there right now is your brick facade goes beyond, if you look at it. And then the way you get in and out would be to the east. That's open. And I would think that probably, see what the other commissioners think, but I would think that probably should remain then and be nice screening for that. The other question Doug had, and I don't know if you fully got it, but we do ask major redevelopments, and I would consider this one just to stub some conduit out for the future for any EV charging stations. We believe that will be something coming in the future, and you're going to destroy your front driveway with that sanitary sewer installation. So what it would entail would be just bringing some conduits. All we're talking about is a couple electric conduits out from the building. It would make sense to just stub them out to that southeast area where you have those 5 stalls. And we're not saying you have to put in EV charging stations. It's just, while you have, it's so simple and so cheap right now, get the conduits in. So in the future, if that becomes something you want to do, and we see a lot more of the EV vehicles here, you have the ability to do it without tearing all your new asphalt up.
Okay.
I have a question for Doug. I just can't remember seeing it in the staff report, and I don't know if it was covered on it, and maybe it's there already, but do you have a Knox box on that building?
I am not sure if there is, so that could certainly be a suggested condition.
You know, it would be for a facility that size.
Yeah.
We like to see a Knox box. All that is a simple little thing you build into your building. You meet with a fire chief. Police might be involved, it's mainly fire, and it gives them access in case of an emergency and nobody is there. They're the only ones that have the key. They can open the Knox box and get into the building in case of emergency. It's a health and safety issue, really, and it's a very minor thing to put in, but a great thing to have on these facilities. I don't know how to read that electrical light temperature map you gave us. So could you explain to me what warmth or what level that is? I know Commissioner DePaula asked about it, and he was looking for things more in the 3,000 range versus the 6,000 range. What are you proposing?
I'd have to pull that back up here. Let's see here.
4,000.
Okay. All right.
4,000. Thank you, Robert. Beat me to it.
He's got a lot younger eyes too. I have to beg off on that. I think that's all I see. I think, again, I think you did a very nice job of addressing all the comments, and I think this will be a great upgrade. Excuse me. The one thing I'm always over anxious I'd like to see is on the other side of that main entryway to get some work done there in the front of this building. But I understand the owner's desire to wait to spend money till he has a tenant in there. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to do what you're doing right now. And when they can get another tenant in there, then maybe we can carry this pattern over in front of the other area where some of your customers will park. But I think you've done plenty for what's going on here right now. And I think you responded well to all our comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Brian?
Yeah, I think the other members did a great job kind of commenting that this looks great. You incorporated all of our feedback. The one piece that I still had a little bit of a question had to do with the lighting as it relates to some of the pole lighting off of the site. And if that is an issue, it sounds like there were some additional poles that were going to be off the property. And I'm just curious, like, how is that being integrated into the bigger complex?
Yeah, so we are coordinating with the adjacent landlord for those poles to address that concern.
And to that point, is the potential of a larger lighting scheme for the larger complex, meaning much larger? Is that part of the discussion, or is it just this extension that's listed in your proposal?
At this point, it's just the extension, but with future plans, that could obviously be increased to a different amount.
Okay. The other question had to do with, I think it was the apron that goes out to, let's see which road, that would be on the north side. Chris, you might be able to help kind of indicate which one I think was laid out in the
I think,
materials.
I think, Brian, what you're talking about is the West Broadway frontage road again.
Yep, yeah, that apron. Is that included in the mill overlay plan?
Currently the mill and overlay plan just includes the area in front of the Floor and Decor, the parking lot, all the way out to the out parcel.
And from my understanding, that apron on that far side is not part of your parcel at all. It's just part of the shared easement agreement. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, our mill and overlay is to the extent of our parcel.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't feel like it's appropriate to tie it to your plans to repair that section. So I'm good beyond that. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Susan?
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I was really pleased to see that your responses to everything that was raised last time, and I think it looks good, so nothing to add. And I do support adding the EV conduits. That makes sense to me, to add a couple at least, maybe more, given the impending proliferation of electric vehicles that's predicted. And you've answered the storage locker question. So yeah, I think it looks good. I'm out of town, unfortunately, and I wasn't able to drive. Usually I drive around the property again to check that brick wall, but it sounds from what Chris said that like that would be appropriate screening. So I have no further comments.
Thank you, Susan. I just have one question myself, and this committee would be shocked probably if I didn't bring it up, which is this, as Chris just said, this does represent a pretty significant redevelopment. And as Floor and Decor, I'm sure knows, and certainly the building owner knows, Monona has a significant commitment to sustainability. And this roof represents, I think, probably the second largest flat roof in the city. And you'd have bragging rights if you put solar on that nice flat roof. So I'm wondering if the owner or Floor Decor might consider additional bragging rights in putting solar on your roof to take care of some of that electric that you're installing.
Yeah, that's
I'll
not,
just say sorry, Danny, I'll just say as the tenant, I mean, we really don't have control. We are leasing the space. So that's a owner item, not a Floor and Decor tenant item.
Well, since the building owner happens to be here tonight, could the building owner answer that? Steve?
I owe you an email, Nancy,
Okay.
and I did get your email. This lease is set up where Floor and Decor is actually taking the space as is and doing all the work. So I did forward your email on to Kaylin Engwall, who is my real estate rep at Floor and Decor, and I'm just awaiting a response from her on kind of her feedback on that.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. As I
Yep.
said, I mean, I think, you know, you'd have certainly have bragging rights here in Monona, but you probably have, I think it would be the second largest solar install in a retail establishment in the entire city of Madison. So just, you know, to put in your cap, Floor and Decor, I think the largest solar install right now is in a retail establishment is on Toyota, is on Smart Toyota. So so you would have some bragging rights and sitting right there on the belt line. As I said, that's something that we're really looking for in Monona and would appreciate everybody's consideration of that.
Great.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have a motion? Chris Humberg.
Yes, I move approval with condition 1 and 2 is written by staff. Condition 3 is written by staff, and at the end of it, add with final approval by staff. Condition 4 is written by staff. Condition 5, that a Knox box be added and coordinated with city staff. Condition 6, that we recommend the masonry enclosure remain as screening for the LP tank storage. And condition 7, that electric conduits be stubbed out for future EV charging stations with staff approval on the location.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Great, Susan, thank you. I have a second. All those, yep, Chris?
Yeah, I made 6 a little loosey-goosey because we've sprung this on without having the ability to talk about it with the applicant and look at it on the plan. I believe it would be in your best interest to maintain that screening wall. We certainly would love to see all those LP tanks in their racks not visible from the front of your building. I think you would too, but I think you need to go out on the site with staff and look at it, make sure it all fits and works.
Doug?
Just clarification on these 7.7, would that be a recommendation or a requirement?
That's a requirement with you looking at them. Wherever they say it's the easiest to stub it out. That entire front road will be torn up. So it's just a matter of putting a couple simple PVC conduits in. When they fill it back up, just have them stubbed somewhere. It'll be in their best interest to do that. It's a minor thing.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. I have a motion in a second. All those in favor say aye. Oh, Doug?
One more, sorry. There had previously been discussion of removing the finding of fact. Is that still?
Oh, thank you. We're removing the finding of fact and we're entering into the record that they do meet our point requirements. Thank you, Doug. That's on the page before the one where I have on my notes.
Across 2 pages, so that was the trick.
Okay.
Thank you.
With that removal, and I have a motion in a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Congratulations, Floor and Decor. We look forward to having you here.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for
Appreciate
your
your
time.
time tonight.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you all.
Moving on to 5E. Public hearing on the request by ENR Investments. CO Mohammed Nasir Faroqi for new signage at 6325 Monona Drive, case number S-008-2021. Mohammed.
Hi, this is Mohammed.
Hi.
We redesigned the sign. We shrunk the sign down to the city limit, to the building that the city required. And I gave all the plans to Doug. And me and Doug actually met on the site and, figure that out. And then the sign company, redesigned it and shrunk down the sign. So that's all I have. So.
Okay. Is there anybody else here to speak? This is a public hearing on this particular item. Okay. That being said, we'll close the public hearing and move to item 5F, consideration of action by ENR Investment, care of Mohammed Nasir Faroqi for new signage at 6325 Monona Drive, case number S-008-2021. And Mohammed, I apologize if I mispronounced your last name.
That's okay.
Doug?
Thank you. So this is a returning sign permit application.
Sorry, I have a Chris?
Just a question, a point of order. Since we tabled it last time, do we not need to remove it from the table to talk about it?
I believe that would be the case, and I thank you.
I moved to bring it back off the table.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Great, thank you. Doug, do I need to call for a vote on that, or is it just, I just need a vote in a second, or a table in a second? I need to vote? Okay, all those in favor, taking it off the table, say aye.
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 Okay, thank you, it's off the table. Doug, go ahead.
Thank you. So this is a returning sign permit application that was tabled at the last meeting in May. The feedback from the commission was shared with both the vendor, the sign vendor, and the applicant. The store dimensions for both frontage and depth were verified on site with the applicant. submitted materials also include reasoning for the cabinet versus the channel letters, which was a discussion point at the last meeting. So really, as in terms of comments, the frontage was confirmed along Monona Drive. The applicant does not have the full depth, but they do have about a third to a half of the depth of the store in an additional portion as well. So it's about 28 linear feet that they have full depth, and these measurements were inside the store, so plus or minus a couple feet there in total. And then there's also the third to a half depth for another 10 to 12 feet as well. It was confirmed as well that there's an office space there that is potentially long-term going to be turned into usable store frontage and space as well. So this all coming together, the new sign as proposed is 30 square feet. The store has around 92 feet of frontage, which combined with the 72 square feet on the O'Connell sign means that this would be about 10 square feet total over code as proposed right now. But it is city staff's opinion that based upon the frontage, the depth, and the redesigned sign, that the proposal, the 30 square feet, is in line and a reasonable request. Therefore, staff recommendation is approval of the sign permit with the 2 conditions as listed in the staff report. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug. Chris?
Well, I'm still off mute. I guess for me, when I look at it, I still think it doesn't match the rest of the building. It should be individually lit letters.
Okay. Rob, Chris, do you have anything else?
No, that's it. I think we could split hairs on the size, but I think it was individually lit letters. It would fit with the building and look more in proportion too.
Okay. Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Chris on the letters. I have no problem with the size. I think that's appropriate. I mean, my thoughts on the sign are, it's not the most attractive sign, and I don't know if it matches the other sign that's there compatibility wise, but I understand financial constraints as well. So that's my thoughts.
Okay. Susan?
Well, I share the same thoughts. I was kind of disappointed to see essentially the same sign come back, just in a smaller version. I think the channel lettering would look much better. I'm wondering if, but I do understand the financial constraints are an issue as well. And I understand it's a significant cost difference in channel lettering. I guess I was wondering, I know we can't make color requirements, but I'm just wondering if you did the cabinet sign, but it was the black and white, and not part of what makes it jump out so much is the red background. I'm just wondering if that might be a compromise. That'd be something that could be considered. And I don't know whether other commissioners would think that makes any difference, but just a thought.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I understand the need for, or the desire for a cabinet based on a new business going into that location. Cabinet signs are very difficult, especially when they're next door to nicely channel lit letters. And on a building that is pretty rugged right now, signage can help. When the O'Connell sign went up, even when it was on a steel framed building, it gave a different warmth, a different appeal to the building as a whole. And I think a cabinet sign is difficult with coherence with the building as well as the neighboring properties. And if we did kind of support a cabinet sign in base to the coordination with neighboring properties, the red background with the white is like a scream out. And I understand, like from a business perspective of like, I want to draw the eyes to my business. I get that. And at the same time, I don't want it to be the eyesore of the draw. So I would like to see a consideration of if we need to stick with the cabinet sign, is there a way to help adequately signage the property so people know where to go, they know what business they're entering, but at the same time, it's not a flash sign.
Okay. Do I have a motion? Where are we at, Chris?
Motion. I move approval with condition 1 and 2 as written by staff, and condition 3 that this be individually lit channel mounted letters with the letters the same size as presented tonight in the cabinet sign, and the final approval of design by staff.
Okay. Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
I could second that for the discussion.
Okay. Do I have a second? Other discussion?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay. So do we have other discussion is my point. Are there other?
I'd like to hear Mohammed's reaction to that.
Mohammed?
Yes, I am listening, and we looked at the both signs, and then we went with the cabinet sign, and if you want to make some changes to the background, I can work with the sign company and have a redesign the sign. The channel letters are a little bit, almost $3,000 more than the cabinet sign. So that's where I was.
Mm-hmm. Chris?
I understand it's cheaper, but what we've always done in the past is we have a center here, and we've kept some consistency on how we sign it, and the primary tenant of this building went with individually lit channel letters, and as Brian said, it helped the look of the building, it helped the look of everything, and to put a cabinet sign on the end, I think we take away from what the building owner did. I think we take away from the look of the entire thing. I don't know better. I'm not real smooth. The cheaper sign looks cheaper. It's
not cheap, but it's almost $6,000 sign. It's not, it's the cabinet sign is the one I had at 6, and I talked to the owner and we discussed, and he was, fine with it. And then I drove down on Broadway, and there were other businesses with the cabinet sign. So it's not going to be a cheap sign. It's still going to be a, professionally built, and, all LED signs in there. It's not going to be tubes or the old one. It's all LED lit up.
Well, perhaps, Mohammed, if, since the commission obviously feels, you heard the feedback, and since we obviously feel that shifting signs, recognizing the financial burden, perhaps you should go back to the owner and see if you can get some assistance from that owner for the type of sign that we feel is necessary, because obviously it sounds like this commission's struggling with the alternative.
Because the feedback I got from Doug was, the sign was big. It was, we can do the cabinet sign as long as shrunk down. And if I'm, mistaken, but Doug was mentioned as long the sign, because the board member said the sign was too big for the building. As long as we shrunk down and keep it appropriate sign, and the council will approve the cabinet, would, didn't object the cabinet sign in the last meeting. I wasn't, in the meeting, but so with everyone's recommendation, we went back to the sign maker and, worked it out. And that's why I had Doug on the side to look at it before we move forward.
Right. Understood. Rob?
I'm struggling with this one. To be frank, I don't care for the cabinet sign. Like, I don't like it. I think the individual lit letters would be better. I think if it was a cabinet sign, it could be better than red with white. But I don't know, at what grounds can we say that we want channel lit letters? Doug, maybe that's a question.
The ordinance has language that they are preferred. That would be the preferred style. It does not sort of mandate them specifically. And so, I had conversations with both the applicant and the sign vendor and understood the financial constraints and the maintenance differences between them. And so I did, I have discussed that, but of course it is ultimately a planning commission decision based upon the ordinance to act upon.
Any other comments from commissioners? I think it's time we have a motion on the floor. And I think it's probably time to take a vote. I think it's, obviously I can tell from commissioners' feedback that it's a tough call. So all those in favor of Chris's motion as offered, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. So, Mohammed, we realize that it's really difficult. We understand the financial ramifications, but, in the absence of being able to find some other reason, being consistent with our code and standards, I think you have to go back to the drawing board.
Okay.
Chris?
Well, he doesn't have to go back. He has a motion tonight to approve that sign as individually lit channel mounted letters. So he can go ahead and actually do it if he chooses to. If he chooses to come back, that's up to him. And I will add too that there was a lot of discussion at last meeting about we prefer the individually channel lit. It wasn't, there was not a discussion, say just make it smaller and the cabinet sign's okay. That was not the meeting we had.
Okay.
Can I get back with Doug? Because now my sign maker is not here, so I can contact the sign company tomorrow and get with Doug and finalize that. If that's the only option I have, I don't have a choice. My hands are tied now.
Doug, that motion's clear enough to you, correct, about what we're looking for as far as individually channel lit, the letters be the size that are presented tonight. If that's all fine, you can just approve it administratively and he can put it up.
Yes, that is.
Right.
I can work with the applicant and we can have a call tomorrow about, as presented and the differences that would need to be made for a staff approval.
Great. Thank you. Mohammed, before you go, can you tell us how to pronounce your last name so we don't butcher it?
It's Faruqi.
Faruqi. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification and I appreciate your patience through these meetings and your understanding. And Doug, thank you for continuing to help Mohammed
So
Ali.
yes, okay, yeah, and then I'll talk to Doug tomorrow morning, and then with the sign company, we'll have figure that out, and then get that, channel letter signed.
Okay,
So,
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
thank you, Doug.
Okay, that takes us to page 2. Item number, or moving to new business, I should say. We have 6A, public hearing on the request by Floor and Decor Outlets of America LLC, represented by Centerpoint Integrated Solutions LLC, for new signage at 2101 West Broadway, case number S-009-2021.
Yes,
Mr. Kelly,
I'm still here.
you're still here.
That's right. So I mailed in a sign packet, so I don't know if you guys would like me to share my screen again or just kind of talk through what was sent. Whatever's easier for the commission, I'm happy either way.
Would you guys like to see it on the screen, or are you good with what's in front of you? You're good with what's in front of you?
I'm
Okay.
good on my end.
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. Then go ahead.
Okay, yeah, we are submitting for a special exception from the city sign standards for the allowable square footage of sign area. The city code requires only a maximum of 150 square feet for each elevation, and our proposed signage is 290.5 square feet for the sign referred to as sign A on your package, and 57.72 square feet for the sign considered sign B. Now, the reason we are requesting such a large special exception is due to the substantial setback from the roadway of the existing building. We are approximately 700 feet from the roadway. And in addition to that, there is 2 out parcels out there, as well as a landscaping buffer. And in addition to that, we added landscaping at the request of the commission that would also block our signage. We believe that the signage that we're proposing is consistent with other large retailers in the area. It is proportional with the size of the large facade. It doesn't look out of whack. In addition to that, the customer pickup area is along the front drive. So this direct signage on the customer pickup area will help for wayfinding to the CPU area. We believe that granting this exception is not contrary to public interest. It will allow Floor and Decor customers to appropriately locate the store when entering from West Broadway due to the fact that the building is set back such a large distance. Like I said earlier, the signage proposed is appropriate and proportional to the size of the building and is not overpowering to the public. Granting the special exception, we believe will kind of give Floor and Decor the exposure from the roadway that other businesses are afforded due to their business location. Other than that, that kind of wraps up my presentation, but I'm open to any questions.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak during the public?
I think they all jumped off, so just me.
It's just you, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll close the public hearing, number 6A, and move to 6B, consideration of action on the request by Floor and Decor Outlets of America LLC, represented by Centerpoint Integrated Solutions LLC, for new signage at 2101 West Broadway, case number S-009-2021. Doug?
Thank you. I'll just run through briefly the applicant again, sort of laid out the 4 different signs, 2 wall signs on the north face, a wall sign on the southern face, the elevation facing the Beltline, as well as a refacing of the existing pylon sign closest to West Broadway frontage road. As outlined, they would be seeking an exception for that. The letter was included in the packet, as was also laid out by the applicant. Also for reference, I did include a few different applications and sizes just for the commission's benefit of different stores within the Southtown Mall area, including the Shopko, the former Shopko, the signage that they had. The wall sign itself, the main entry sign is about 50 square feet larger as proposed than what was in place. Again, on the southern face, the wall sign facing the Beltline is roughly proportional and within the ballpark to the other adjacent tenants. One thing I did want to call out that differs slightly from the former use is, of course, the subdivision and the partition of the space. So I would ask that the commission kind of discuss that a little bit, how the signage may work. The wall sign is probably fairly straightforward based upon frontage, but certainly the pylon sign, any co-tenancy or anything like that, whether it's an addition to the existing pylon sign or sort of a partition of what's there. So I would just seek some feedback and some comment on that. And that covers my staff report. Thank you.
Chris?
Okay. To respond to your last question first, Doug, the pylon signs were granted exclusively to the two anchor tenants in there, which were Kohl's and Shopko, and then eventually when the theaters were there, they were granted another one. So no, another tenant wouldn't be granted availability of signage on the pylon sign. That was just for the Shopko store, what I would consider now the remaining anchor tenant. And I agree with your reading that the space that's left would be, they'd have available what's on their frontage. As far as the signage that's been proposed, I'm fine with it. And I think we need to make a number of findings of fact to support that, but I think that's quite defensible. And I think the signage package as presented is tasteful. The question I would have would be the landscaping at the base of the pylon sign. You had a question about that, and I'd like to hear what the rest of the commission feels. Right now, it's just the two pipes coming out. There's grass all the way around, and it's right really where you come through McDonald's drive-through is where you see it. So certainly the building owner would have the ability to have that landscape, but then it would also be maintained. Is that necessary, or do we want to call out these two pipes coming through? It's not a landscape ground sign. It's a pylon sign. And I agree we normally landscape the base, but in this case, do we want to call more attention to these two brown pipes? And I looked at the paint. If that's the color the applicant likes, the paint's not in bad shape. It would be nice to know from the applicant if they're planning on repainting it to a different color. And I think that's the limit of my questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kelly, did you want to respond to Chris's question about painting the pylon?
Yeah, I think we're going to maintain the same color. Now, when we get out there, it's in rough shape, we will definitely maintain that and refresh it a little bit, but I don't think there's any plan to change the color scheme. Like, our plan right now is just the sign face.
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, I think this falls into the category of this is an appropriate size sign for the building. I think the exception is warranted. We've done it in the past at the current and granting a taller flagpole at WPS. It's just appropriate to the size of the building. I think the overall design and layout is good. As far as the pylon sign goes, I don't think that needs landscaping at the bottom. I think just maintain lawn is fine. It's not a landscape ground sign, it's a pylon sign. So I don't think that's necessary. Personally, I think that's all I got. That's good.
Steve Doran, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, Chris, you relative to the pylon sign. So we are working with another user to take the balance of the building that's going next to Floor and Decor. And one of the challenges we have had in leasing this space is it is so far off the road. And so the user that I am working with does want a panel below Floor and Decor. We're currently just slightly under what's allowed size of panel on that sign. So we were going to propose some major improvements to the pylon and add another pylon or another panel underneath Floor and Decor, mainly because I think the sign and the poles look cheap. And so we were going to propose some improvements to the sign, as well as add another panel to it. So I mean, I'm not looking for any sort of nod to that tonight. I guess letting you know that is my plan going forward. Whenever I get a lease done for that space, we were hopeful the city would work with us on granting another panel. We're not looking for a panel anywhere near the size of what Floor and Decor has, but just a small panel there to help with visibility along Broadway for that tenant.
Thank you. Susan.
Yeah, I think those last comments make some sense, and we probably should consider those. I think the signage looks great, and I don't have any issues with it. So I think all the comments have been made. It'll be a nice. It's very attractive. So and appropriate signage, I think, appropriate sizing, and I think. There's a question raised about the second tenant, whether the signing out, that signage obviously will be smaller because it's a smaller space, but I think you can still have it stand out. I mean, I don't think this will dwarf it, especially given the signs of Hobby Lobby and Planet Fitness and the others. I think looks good.
Thank you, Susan. Brian?
I think the overall signage package looks great. Regarding the landscaping, I agree with Rob and others that I think if we actually required landscaping, it would be out of maintenance really quick. So I agree with just keeping it grass for now. Regarding a future tenant, look forward to that proposal, Steve. And the consideration of adding a panel would be part of that discussion, and we'll keep it there.
Thank you. Any other comments from committee members, commission members? Chris?
Well, I feel like since Steve addressed me, I should comment about it. Those pylon signs were specifically for those two anchor tenants. Later on, when we had the theater, we added another pylon sign, and we had the theaters on there. When the theaters left, we changed that. So we had somebody come in and negotiate. And I think it certainly is possible. I agree with you. I think two pipes sticking up is a pretty ugly sign. So if anybody were to come in and say, I'm going to upgrade this sign, I'm going to make it a lot more attractive, I would like to have a little change to that, I think it's worth at least a discussion. How's that?
Great.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you. Do I have a motion for the consideration and action? Yes, Chris.
Good thing it's being recorded, Doug. I'll move approval of the sign package as presented with the following findings of fact. Number one, the building has a substantial setback from Broadway, and as an anchor tenant needs visibility. Two, the main signage is comparable to the former Shopko signage as well as the other anchor tenants in this center. Three, the signage is appropriate for the size of the remodeled and enlarged entry feature on the building. Four, the customer pickup signage is wayfaring signage, and due to the size of the parking lot and the distance to the customer pickup area, we need signage that can identify it and not create confusion on the site. Five, that the customer pickup signage is actually a reduction from the previous specific identification signage on Shopko, or reduction in square footage from the previous identification signage on the Shopko store. And with that, we would have our normal two conditions, Doug. Number one, that electrical permits will have to be taken out. And then two, if the glare is deemed excessive, the Plan Commission may require the signs to be modified to reduce that glare.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye. Yep, Chris?
I just was going to ask if there's something obvious I forgot from other commissioners on the findings of fact.
Oh, that sounded good to me. I think it's, yeah, good to put all those conditions, all those elements in,
Well, we try to keep the scope narrow.
right?
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Chris. All set, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you guys for your time. Have a great night.
Look forward to seeing you all.
All right. We look forward to being there. Bye.
Moving on to 6D, consideration of action on the request by Galway Companies for approval of a new comprehensive signage plan and feature wall at 6406 Bridge Road, case number S-010-2021. Chris.
I am currently working for the owner on this project, so I will have to abstain on it.
Right, thank you. Where does that put us in terms of, well, it doesn't put us anywhere in terms of a consideration of action, so let's, yeah, Chris.
I brought this question up through the years many, many times, and I've gotten different answers. We've convened with a quorum. So because of an abstention, does that mean we lose the quorum? Or since we convene with a quorum, is the vote still hold? So I don't know the answer, and I think Cole will have to tell us, but my recommendation would be you proceed as if you can take an action tonight and then check with the attorney before you go do something and give the permit to the owner. And if the attorney says, well, no, you really need to have a quorum there on the vote versus convening with a quorum, because there's a big question about which is which.
Right.
Yeah, I know this has come up on the school board, and my understanding is you need a quorum for the vote.
Okay.
Not just that once you don't have a quorum, you don't really have legal action. But that doesn't mean we couldn't do what we did before and recommend it tonight and then do a quick vote later, just as a formality. I mean, would that be reasonable?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, we're,
Yeah.
was it,
Sorry, just as a process, I think we had skipped straight to 6D for consideration, but we should have the public hearing 6C.
Right, sorry, I mean, I meant to say public hearing, and I've got it, I was just about to say we're at the public hearing. So, so let's go ahead with a public hearing for Galway Companies on the request for approval of a new comprehensive sign plan and feature wall at 6406 Bridge Road. That's 6C.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Yoder with Sign Art Studio. Can you all hear me?
We can.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We do have two separate packets, but I'll try to switch over efficiently here. Okay. Share. All right. Can everybody see the screen?
We can.
Yep. All right. So what we did here is we worked with Steve and his team on phase one of the current. So in terms of the building signage itself, we kept everything consistent. And here we have a site plan showing locations. And okay, let me get back here. Oh, hold on. Home. Okay. All right, so for the main building identification, we took pretty much the exact same sign we did for phase one, modified slightly just so we give a little more character for this particular building. We worked with the vertical element, which I believe is the elevator area. And so that is the main building identification sign. Next, we have a building address that we are mounting to the wood canopy structure. We have another parking sign to identify the parking ramp. And then that's, sorry, this is for the public parking area, I believe. And then this one was basically a replica of the phase one sign for resident parking. And then lastly, this particular page is showing both the feature wall with the current identification sign added to it. And basically, this sign consists of, well, the sign itself is individual channel letters that are mounted to this art feature wall. And the art feature wall consists of aluminum and acrylic bars that have color changing LEDs that are controlled by a module remotely within them. And the face of all of these bars is opaque. And so the light disperses from the sides and the back and will wash onto a metal corrugated paneling that will be mounted to the wall in the back. And then I'm going to hop over to, we got some other details on the other submittal that shows a section view of the light wall feature. These are also just showing a couple different, you know, looks in terms of what the lighting could look like. And then here's the detail. So as you can see, there's a big wall recess, and if you can see my cursor here, this is the actual light bar, and that is mounted 4 inches off of the corrugated wall, or 3 inches, I'm sorry. The light bars themselves are 4 inches deep. The nice thing about where we're installing this and where we selected to install it in terms of how far out from the wall is that it's going to really kind of capture a lot of, you're not going to have a lot of excess of light wash out beyond this opening, which is an advantage in terms of dark sky. And then this element right here shows where the logo sign would be mounted. And then lastly, this is a late submittal, but Steve wanted to make sure we got this in there. Let's just give some information as you enter the parking ramp in terms of the use of the parking ramp. And I'm happy here to, I'll be here to answer any further technical questions that you guys have, but I think that pretty much gives a good overview. Thank you.
Is there anyone else to speak related during this public hearing portion of this request? Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public hearing on the request by Galway Companies. And we are in a jam in terms of a quorum. So as Susan suggested, what we could do is go ahead and provide some feedback this evening and not be able to take action, right? So we'll move to 6D, consideration of action on a request by Galway Companies for the approval of the new comprehensive sign plan feature wall at 6406 Bridge Road, case number S-010-2021. Doug, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you. I'll give kind of an overview and highlight a couple of discussion points potentially. So really, as outlined, the majority of this application is for wall signage. The building, obviously, pretty unique in the fact that it does face effectively 3 different street frontages. And so in total, the wall signage is just under 200 square feet. That includes the 2 wall signs that state the current, as well as the 2 for the parking identification as well. Additionally, there's the address sign, which would be looking for an exception, as well as the identification warning markers that were suggested, or sorry, were required as a condition of the zoning permit. So just as some background, the signage was a condition of the 2020 approved zoning permit. It required a comprehensive signage plan, also required warning signage along Inland Way for pedestrians and vehicles crossing sort of near the park there at the main public parking entrance. And it did also require public parking identification and wayfinding as part of the overall approvals. Additionally, obviously, as outlined tonight, is the feature wall as well. I was trying to break that up a little bit in that I'm not sure it's necessarily direct signage, you know, absent the current sign, And I know the applicant, certainly with that one, I know there's a longer lead time on that. So certainly some feedback for that piece I know would be appreciated. From a comment standpoint, staff thinks that the wall signage itself is appropriate given the scale of the building. Again, with the address sign, the identification along Bridge Road, given the frontage and the scale, seems appropriate. The main concern here being the parking identification, specifically along Inland Way. Just from a wayfinding point of view, I had discussed a couple of different options of things, maybe more like a traditional P or, the sort of identifier there. I do think that a little bit more delineation, the late addition, I think, helps with that as you enter the ramp, but certainly just thinking of site circulation and conflicts there. So just wanted to raise that as a potential discussion point, but generally the signage, although looking for exceptions, I think mostly appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
I'm abstaining.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. Rob?
Okay, in general, it looks really good and appropriate, just like the other current building. It's a couple of things on the caution signs for the pedestrian crossing and the watch for vehicles. You identify a couple locations on it, 4 locations. And for the caution watch for vehicles, I understand there's one facing one direction of pedestrians walking along Inland Way and one going for the other direction. That makes sense. But the slow pedestrian crossing, they're on either side of that entry. Is that, if you're coming out of that parking ramp, you can see a pedestrian crossing sign, but there's one on the other side as well. I don't know who that's supposed to be warning. It's past the sidewalk. It's GDN. Maybe I'm not picking up something, but maybe someone can explain the layout of those.
Dan, can you explain?
Yep, I'm getting there. So just finding the mute button here. Just give me 1 second and pulling up the plans. Robert, to answer your question, in terms of those signs, I think we're going to be amenable to what you guys suggest. And I am just trying to pull that particular sheet up here right now, so I can take a look at it. And I would imagine Steve would be agreeable that why I'm not finding that sheet right now on my packet.
It's page 123, Dan, of the overall packet.
On 23?
123.
Oh, on the submittal on the city.
Yeah.
That one is still trying to load on my internet at home, unfortunately.
I guess it's not so overly critical at this point, just in that they get kind of placed in the right spots.
Well, we can't, so, ideally we'd put one on our property and then one on the park, right? Because that would be on, the sidewalk path, but we can't necessarily just put a sign on city property. I think, is that kind of what you're going for? Is it doesn't make sense to face the slow pedestrian sign towards Inland Way. It makes more sense to face it so traffic driving up and down Inland Way can see it. Is that kind of what you're going after?
Well, it's not signing a crossing for Inland Way, right? Is it signing for the crossing of the sidewalk over the parking entrance?
Well, I think it could,
And mine's loading up here too. So I'll have a good look at it here. Loading.
How do you think those signs should be, Rob?
the caution watch for vehicles. I think those should be one on either side of the entranceway, and pedestrian crossing. It seems to make sense for cars exiting the ramp to watch for people along the sidewalk, the north side of the sidewalk. The other one, I'm in city right away, I guess, is where it belongs. If it's to warn cars of pedestrians crossing that entrance, it should be before that sidewalk. Now I understand that you can't just put signs on public city right away, but that's where it belongs if that's what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, so traffic leaving the parking ramp, we clearly can address that and put the slow pedestrian crossing sign on our property and warn cars that are leaving the parking garage to slow down for the sidewalk, right? It's cars entering the parking garage where that sign doesn't necessarily make any sense because you're going to already be over the sidewalk by the time you see the sign.
Correct. I think it's something that can be worked out with Public Works or whomever, city staff, but just, and maybe this graphic is just kind of a placeholder, but I'm sure you'll find the appropriate spot for it.
Yeah.
As far as the exceptions, like the address, the numbers, it's a nice feature. It's an addition in my mind to allow that. And then the feature wall is very interesting, and it's big. And my first concern was how bright is this going to read like a digital billboard? And I don't think that's the intent based on the details and explanation.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry?
Nope, I said, excuse me, I just coughed.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
I was down there today and I was looking, and it's appropriate to the kind of energy that whole street corridor has developed into, with the breakwater and the yacht club and the park. And I'm thinking about the houses across the Yahara, if that's going to be like a big glowing changing thing. My initial thoughts are that it's going to be relatively screened, at least during the summer months. It doesn't directly orient itself. I don't know. It didn't seem like it's going to be an issue, hopefully. It's certainly kind of an art element. It is also absolutely a sign, if it has the current on it, though. But I would only consider the square footage of the sign itself, the current, to be part of the sign. The rest it's a different animal, one like we've never seen in Monona before. And it sounds like there's a lot of control allowed with the sign, which is good. But in general, I like it. I think I'm going to like it. It's so hard to represent light and color and how that's going to actually translate. But I think I'm going to like it.
And I'll add one thing there, Robert. There's tons of control options. And then also the fact, when we looked at this project, we also shared some of the same concerns in that, how much light do we want to blast? And so making the face of those light bars opaque so that you're getting light only out of the sides and the back was something that we thought would still give the effect that we were going, and also reduce that overall light exposure. And again, with all the different controls that we have with it, there's just kind of infinite possibilities to control brightness, color, how it moves. So just lots of flexibility there.
Great.
Yeah, and
thank you.
Rob, I want something subtle here. Nothing that's going to be like a Las Vegas light show, right? I mean, I just want something subtle that looks really nice. That just, we have so many color changing abilities with the sign. In the wintertime, we could do red and green. It can kind of maneuver between red and green for Christmas, and breast cancer awareness month. We can do pink. I mean, it's just kind of, there's so many different themes we can do here, but we certainly don't want anything that's going to be flashy to our residents or people across the river, for that matter.
Yeah, and I think you're doing that. So, all in all, I think it's a great package. You've done a great job with your signs in the past, and I anticipate these will be equally as good. Oh, the public parking. I think the late submittal of these are for these businesses is good. I would agree that having some sort of notice to passerbys before they get up to that kiosk or whatever that was would help to the flow of traffic and identify public parking spaces.
Yeah, and part of where that's pedestal, we plan to put a pedestal there with that sign with a gate where people, have to push the button, the gate will open. So even if they get there, we're having just all sorts of parking issues, and we've been monitoring it. And a lot of our parking issues stem from Saturday, for example, we caught 6 different vehicles parking in our upper parking lot, unloading their coolers from their car and walking down to their buddies' boats. And so we just don't, we want to try to attack this on the front end. And this parking facility that we've built, the city is for people that are using Grand Crossing Park or visiting one of the commercial establishments. It's not for parking rides, it's not for people jumping on boats, it's for the park and the commercial users. So people will be able to pull up to that garage, and they'll be able to look at, hey, this is for Grand Crossing Park and the commercial users. And if they say, oh, I'm not supposed to be here, they'll be able to push the button, drive in, turn around, and come back out. They won't be stuck.
Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, and I don't want to promote signage that's going to further complicate the matter either.
Yeah, we looked at a lot of different things. We looked at putting sign on the outside of the building, but I thought that would look too tacky. I didn't want a bunch of signs on the outside of the building. I thought a nice pedestal sign would be the best way to attack it. And I would ask, I guess, even with that pedestal sign, to work with staff a little bit, because I think we can do a better job cleaning up how that pedestal sign even looks, to just make it look a little more professional.
Yeah, I would like to see what you come up with, but yeah, I'm curious to hear what other commissioners think. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Susan?
Yeah, actually, just to answer the question, because I was going to suggest that because you make residential parking very clear with a sign, and just have parking, to me, it needed to say public parking, but after your last comments, I kind of see why you wouldn't want to do that. So I'll withdraw that thought. And I think, yeah, working on that pedestal sign will be a good idea, because I think that will be necessary. I mean, that's a good point. People will do that, park and get on their friends' boats. I'm also pleased with the description of the lighting on the decorative screen as well. That was my only concern really about all this. I think all the signage looks great, and that was my only concern, was how bright it was, and it really sounds like it will be subtle, and I would think that you wouldn't want it to be glaring. And we would probably have our usual language about if there is a glare, that it would be dealt with as well. The only other question I had, I guess, was the current sign on the Bridge Road part, which I like, the vertical sign. Just wondering if you considered placing it up higher. It just, to me, it looks a little odd in the low range. That just might be me. I mean, I just thought it might show more and look better up a little higher. I like the look though. So it's just a thought, not a serious comment. Otherwise.
Yeah, we did look at putting it higher. The problem is the building is so close to the road that as you're walking up and down that sidewalk, or even driving, if you get high level, it's just,
you can't see it. Yeah.
Right.
True. Yeah, that makes sense. And you wouldn't see that from Broadway anyway so much because of where it is. So yeah. Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Brian.
Great comments by other commissioners. I think the overall sign package looks wonderful. The art wall or featured wall, as whatever it said, I think it's a great addition. I think it meets the expectations that we had regarding like we need to do something in this space to make sure that it isn't just a big flat piece of concrete. And the way that the lighting has been described, I think it will meet that expectation. That's the most exciting piece. Rob, when you were mentioning those other pieces regarding the city right away, I think the signs about the pedestrians crossing, I think that's a city issue that we need to address on our side. I don't think it's the applicant's issue regarding the slow pedestrian piece for city right away. As you were pointing out, other than that, I think it looks great. No other comments, except, let's see. So I had that same question about public parking versus just a parking sign. And hearing that, I agree. I understand why, like, maybe that change. And the element with, like, how do we help reinforce at least some type of training? The idea of if you're showing up there, like, are you parking here for what it is that you're intended to? Knowing that it won't deter everybody, but it will deter some. So that would be great. Other than that, I'm good.
Thank you. Dan or Steve, as everybody's commented, the art wall is something that we were definitely looking for something different. I know my first reaction was a little bit like it was a more of a billboard than an art wall. And I'm wondering if are there any examples? Is this so, I mean, have you seen this treatment done on any other wall?
Not in this way, no. I mean, typically these types of LEDs are used to wash big areas of a wall, or they're used in a digital fashion for like what you're saying, like a digital board that you can change the message on that you might see by a bank or something. But it's kind of the thing that we get ourselves into at Sign Art Studio is we're doing different things. I do have some images that I found online that I could share. I don't know how really applicable. It's the best I could find. So I'll share those real quick and you can let me know what you think. This really was the only thing I could find that would have some sort of relevance to what we're doing. Where you have an opaque material on the front and it glows out of the back. But beyond that, I mean, this is the only, we see lots of these types of treatments with this type of lighting. But to answer your question, no, it's pretty rare. So rare, in fact, that this is, I've been in the sign industry for 22 years. I've never seen anything like it. And this was the best I could find after about an hour of scouring the internet.
Okay.
Nancy,
Go ahead.
Nancy, can I point out, like, I mentioned that in the sense of what I think they're proposing is what some of us were expecting to see. This is something new. This is something creative, like that hasn't been done around here. I think this is actually a different type of art installation versus the other types of art installation that others may have seen. So at least the way I heard you represent it, that we were underimpressed by this proposal. I'm actually the reverse. I think this is actually a great proposal for that space.
Yeah, thanks. And I think part of all of this really nods to the surrounding environment, with all the waterways, the pattern of the bars, in that wave shape that I believe, JLA kind of showed the initial rough concept, I think on the initial plan set. And, we all worked collaboratively to see how we could execute it in a way that it was going to be subtle and classy, and something completely different. And, we're excited to do it. Hopefully we get your support and approval for it. And I think it'll be a great addition to the community and something that people are going to want to take their picture by, they want to stand up and walk, but and just look at it and watch it. So it's just neat. It's exciting to be a part of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just Brian, just to clarify, I wasn't suggesting that it would necessarily be someplace around here. Just recognizing, that we have Google these days and that there's lots going on across the globe, but never mind across the United States. I'm having a hard time envisioning it, but I appreciate Steve saying that he wants it to be subtle. So, because, of course, I'm a gigantic fan of the arts. We've said all along we wanted something artistic. I just didn't want people to be sitting at the park feeling like they were staring at something too over the top. So I appreciate the additional explanations from Dan and others and Steve around what happens there.
Yeah. What's kind of hard to see with the imagery too, and Dan and I have had probably 100 conversations about these things, is there's bars that kind of block to some extent most of the LED like blasting in your face as you might think. I mean, it's really intended to kind of back glow the corrugated blue panels in the background. And so what we really wanted here was something like really cool during the day, but really, really cool and exciting during night. So if you're standing in the park, you'd have, it'd be somewhat exciting, but it wouldn't be like, you wouldn't have to cover your eyes. You just subtly see like, some color on there. So.
Sure. Great. Well, I appreciate the additional explanation. And I have one other thing that maybe it's just an age thing for me, but I know that I've been to a number of campuses where all the buildings are named the same thing. And even though they have different addresses, people spend a lot of time wandering around trying to figure out which building. And so I'm just wondering, I mean, is it convention to, instead of calling this the current 2 or something, to be calling it the same as the first building? It just seems like that might be confusing in terms of people's wayfaring. But again, maybe that's just my.
I can argue this both ways. We've really, really struggled with naming here. Really struggled. I mean, for a while we actually had a different name for the project for a long time, and just didn't love it, and just felt like the whole project itself had become the current, and I don't know, from a leasing standpoint on the apartments, there's amenities in the second building that the residents in the first building will be able to utilize, and vice versa. People in the second building will be able to use amenities in the first building. And so we really want this to feel as if it is one big project, the current. We've done a lot of things with just the marketing or our new website, and just marketing of not necessarily marketing, but naming doors to make sure that, for example, we have 4 floors on both buildings, right? So we have, 401 to call it 440 on the first building. Well, in the second building, the numbers are going to start at 450. So there's not going to be a unit 401 in both buildings, for example. There's not going to be unit 402. There will only be one unit 401 in both buildings. So I think we've tried to do a good job of making sure that we minimize that, but it is definitely, I will admit it, it's something that we've definitely struggled with, and we just frankly couldn't come up with another name that we liked better than what we have. And we have a lot of momentum just with social media right now with the current that I think we're able to leverage with the second building. I think we'd lose that if we start bringing another name in. So.
I was just thinking about another number. I wasn't thinking about another name. Like, could you call it the current 2 as opposed to just the current? Because I would find I would find it confusing, but obviously you've given a lot of thought, so.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, we can put like, thinking of this light wall, for example, we could put the current 2 there, but we feel like that's part of the overall project, right? I mean, I think that.
Right. Right. Okay. So time-wise, as you know, we can't, without a quorum, we can't take a vote tonight. Are you guys in a jam in terms of a decision this evening?
Well, I think go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, the biggest thing for us, obviously, right now, as everybody's experiencing, it's getting better, supply chain issues, and the level of complexity with the actual feature wall itself. That's the big push for us right now. So I don't know if that changes anything, being that, or how it relates to ordinance, with that particular element. If there was a way that we could get some level of approval on that, the sign that gets mounted to it isn't as mission critical, I will say, but certainly the level of complexity and making sure we get, there's a lot of these LEDs. We did talk to our manufacturer. They want a longer lead time than we normally would get with them. So that's the big push right now, is the actual feature wall, the art wall. We would love approval on all of it today, and I don't understand the complexities and the nuances of the quorum and all that stuff, but understand. So I guess that gives you guys some insight on what we're looking for tonight.
Susan?
Well, I just wondered if we could just schedule a special meeting, and just literally this would be the only thing on the table. And since we've all discussed it, we could make the recommendations. I mean, 2 other members, but my understanding is it would not be a legal action tonight without a quorum. But I'd be fine with a special meeting. I don't know if people are, if this was just a night that was bad, or if a week is bad, or.
Right, that was going to be my next suggestion. If you guys feel like you cannot wait until the next plan commission meeting.
When is the next? Here's my thought. I think I've heard enough commentary tonight that I feel like I have support, that I'm going down the right path, and that I'm, this is something the city wants to see. So I think, Dan, I'm willing to go at risk and just order them tomorrow.
Yeah.
Based on the commentary I've heard tonight. When is the next plan commission meeting? And I guess who is missing tonight that may alter?
I'm not envisioning, well, first of all, I can't speak to the people that are not here tonight. That's the whole point of a quorum, is that everybody gets to have their own opinion. So we are legally bound to not take action tonight. But the next meeting would be June 28th.
Okay.
So it's either holding off until June 28th, or that we try to find a time when there'd be enough commissioners that we could have a special meeting before the 28th of June, where there'd be a quorum where we could actually vote on it.
Who's missing tonight, Nancy?
It's Corinne Fallett, Patrick DePula. Who am I missing?
Christy,
sorry. And Christy, go forth. Alder, go forth.
Nancy, when you have a moment, I have a point that might be helpful.
Okay.
So the reason I called out the light fixture and application, to me, is an art installation and not a sign. They are 2 different elements. And a sign, we have to have a vote, and it's part of our sign ordinance. An art installation is very, very different. And I think you can proceed, because I don't think we're bound to the same expectations. We would have the same expectations around the impact on your neighbors as it relates to light penetration and diffusion, all those aspects. But I don't see that as part of the sign, although I did hear Commissioner Rob indicating that he sees it as one whole sign. So I'd like to see, or I'd like to hear him comment on my interpretation of this, but I see the back panel and the lighting as an art installation, which was part of our previous discussions at regarding just the building itself, and the sign overlay of the current on top of that as part of the sign package.
Yeah, well, can I address that quick?
Yes, you may.
It must have been miscommunication because I stated that I only considered the current text lettering as part of the sign. I never considered the whole wall as part of the sign.
Right.
Perfect. We're on the same page then. Sorry.
Right. Although it seems to me that when we've had art and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe a few years ago when you were chair, when we had, for instance, I think Cozy Home or maybe some other establishments where we had art combined with what would be considered a sign, we considered we weren't distinguishing this way. Am I right about that?
Well, that was during the time of the whole Supreme Court kind of ruling. And this, unfortunately, I'll give you the best example, Visions Nightclub. This was one of the key issues of you have a sign, but on a background, you might have artwork. Or on the side of many of our buildings now, up and down Monona Drive, we have artwork. And all of that artwork is not considered a sign. So you have the whole side of, let's see, the automotive store next to the spa store on Monona Drive. It's got artwork all down the whole side of the building.
Right.
That is not brought to us as a sign. It's considered art.
Yeah, except for the fact that if they were to put autos on the side of it, we decided it would be a sign.
No, we can't. We can't, because that's the Supreme Court like ruling is if you have to look at it to decide, you can't do it. So you can't judge it based on the content that's represented in the visual aspect. That's why we had to put in pieces around cabinet lit letters versus channel lit, or in coherence with like the appropriate or adjacent buildings. Like we've had to come up with all of these other ways to describe how we can regulate signs. And signs is one category, but artwork is the other.
Well, before we go too far down the path, let me just go back to Steve and Dan for a minute. With the next meeting being on the 28th of June, is that going to put you guys in a horrible bind, knowing what you know tonight, because we're in a bind because we can't vote? Is it going to put you a bind in terms of schedule to wait until the 28th?
In term, I guess to answer your question as candidly as possible, it will certainly put us in a much better position if we have some way and some level of confidence leaving this meeting tonight. 2 weeks, I know doesn't sound like a lot of time. This is something new for us. I'm sure we're going to run into, build challenges. We would sure love, I guess to answer your question, we really would love something tonight. I understand where you guys are at. You guys your hands are tied. Or if they're tied, I guess that's up to you guys.
It's not up to us, it's
shortly
up to
answer your
Rob.
question. Shortly to answer your question, it would certainly put a 2 week more of a hurt on us than if we had something tonight.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is, Nancy, I'm just gonna have to go at risk and order them. I don't think we can wait. I mean, and part of that I will say is on us for not coming to you earlier for approval, and we've just been struggling to make sure that we want it, you know, we presented this exactly how we wanted it. And so,
Yeah.
I think I've heard enough tonight where I think, you know, I'd like to believe that everyone on commission that's here tonight thinks I'm headed the right direction. So I'll have to go at risk and order the LED light bars and just come back on the 28th for final.
Sounds good, Steve. I mean, it's not, again, it's not that we wouldn't like to do something, but legally
Sure.
we can't. We need a quorum.
I
So,
completely understand.
okay.
Nancy, are
Yeah.
we able to ask Chris for a comment based on my monologue? Sorry. I'd just like to hear, given his history, if I have it accurate based on his understanding when we were going through the Supreme Court kind of decision-making, as well as our updated sign ordinance, and in relation to artwork.
Right. So Chris, would you like to have a monologue after Brian's monologue?
No, I'd like a short answer. I don't know for sure, Brian. I think it's almost legal opinions. When they're artwork, we do have some ability to talk about, just like we do as colors and materials, etc. And when you all of a sudden, the one you're thinking of, Cozy Home, before it's Cozy Home, was the dance studio. They wanted to put a big ballerina on there to advertise that they're dancers. Then in our mind, it became a sign. It turned it from being art to being a sign. And then once it's a sign, we can regulate size. And we said, you know, you can't put a sign advertising your business the whole side of the building. That's, you know, it's a little much. So how that changes, Brian, I'm not sure. But without the ballerina, if it's artwork, we do have ability to regulate how buildings look. That isn't our purview. So I think it's a tough one.
Why is it that none of these buildings that get artwork done on the side of their buildings ever come to planning commission?
That's an excellent question. Excellent question.
It's because I think they're artwork and not signs. Much like, even though the city helped kind of do this piece, the artwork on the well as you enter the Beltline off of Broadway, I do believe we had some say in that, but that was only because we were a partner.
Yeah, that came to Planning Commission. We approved it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I thought, you know, in Cozy Home, what they wanted to do was actually write the Cozy Home on it. It was clearly a sign. And I actually, at the time, I suggested that instead of doing that, they do a mural that just was indicative of, but now based on what you just said about, I wasn't on the Plan Commission back when the dance studio wanted to do that. So you're saying because my interpretation would have been that would just be a mural and they could do a mural of a home interior. And I thought that'd be okay, but you're saying, no, that would be a sign. So you probably need some clarification on that as well. But it does make sense to me, though, that this wall is, I thought Brian's explanation of it as a piece of art made sense. And the only sign part is the letters in my mind, but anyway.
Right. And I guess I would say that my understanding in terms of the murals is that, you know, if the murals, let's say at the auto parts store, if the mural had been a bunch of auto parts or a bunch of autos, or if Herboni's wanted to paint the side of their wall and it was all spaghetti and meatballs or whatever, you know, then I mean, it's the slippery slope that Chris is talking about, and that I referenced earlier, that I think it becomes, but because the murals do not have any direct connection to the purpose of the business, and they're private establishments, then it becomes, in a sense, then it becomes art, which we can't regulate. At least that's my understanding. It's the way it was looked at the time that it was done. In any case, I think Steve and Dan have their answer tonight, as much of an answer as we can give you guys. And we will plan on seeing you guys back here on the 28th. And I thank you for your patience this evening and understanding of our legal predicament.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
This takes us to a pre-hearing conference, number 6E. Pre-hearing conference on the request by Bang Tao for consideration of a zoning permit for a new use at 901 Femrite Drive, case number 2-014-2021. First of all, let me just start by saying thank you for your patience. I know it's been a long evening, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
I'm not sure if I'm seeing anybody on the meeting. I see one.
Was he originally on?
I believe we had a couple phone folks
Yeah.
who joined by phone. I see one guest in the meeting, but I don't know which. Are you for the 6F, the other pre-hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So I can introduce the application. It's if that would be helpful.
Sure.
Okay. So this application is for 901 Femrite Drive. It is a pre-hearing, really to get some direction on the proposed use. This is an existing church, the Springs of Hope Fellowship Church, which I understand is currently up for sale. There is a purchase offer from another church that is kind of working through the contingency process at this time. And included in the packet was a letter from the current pastor, Pastor Jeff King, as well as the elder board, kind of highlighting this and mentioning that that is kind of the preferred route. This applicant is effectively the sort of second option that the church would have at this point. And so the applicant is looking for initial feedback kind of early in the process from the commission, if this would be something that is possible in advance of kind of continuing those discussions should that first offer fall through. So the application itself is really for a community center, community use type space with very limited reconfiguration of the interior of the building. The exterior, the parking lot, all those elements would be to remain the same. At this point, it would really just be a reuse of the interior. So mainly it would be sort of a weekdays and evenings, but sort of pretty limited, 8 till 6 hours, things like that. And then with specific local groups being able to rent this out for religious services and also for special events. A key piece of this is that the applicant would like to make this available to the Hmong community, specifically for wakes, which I understand go into maybe 2 or 3 days in duration, which are not always available at other facilities. So it really is quite a broad spectrum of uses and that the applicant is looking to be able to bring into here, but really a community gathering. The application does discuss parking, things like that, number of visitors, and they expect that the site can handle that. I believe there's around 90 parking stalls as is. So it is in the Community Design District, the CDD. So I think at this point, really quite high level discussion and open it up for feedback that I can certainly relay back to the applicant.
Okay.
Thanks.
In the absence of having an applicant here, do we have anything we want to share with Doug that he can take back? Chris?
Sure. I think the application is so vague. I don't know if it's appropriate or not. Is it an assisted living facility? Is it a daytime homeless shelter? There's so many things that could go under what he's saying. I don't know how to respond to it. I'd have to have a lot more specific. What are you actually going to do here? The way the application's worded to me, it could be virtually anything that helped people in need during the day. It's so vague. I don't know how to respond to it. And I'd certainly want to have input from the neighborhood about it. So, for me, I hate to not give them a direct answer, but we don't have a direct question.
Thank you. Rob?
I think Chris brings up a good point. I guess based on what the applicant had presented, it to me sounded like standard business hours, activities for a certain clientele, aging or disabled clientele. I guess I don't know what sort of activities they provide. I could speak to the rental use. I think that seems appropriate use, and based on the limited information given, I think there's potential for compatible use, but there are some questions to be asked about what's actually taking place during those business hours. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Susan?
Yeah, I would agree. We would need more description, but just based on what we had, it seemed compatible to me. It did seem like he talked about daytime hours. In fact, he mentions in here the hours at some point, Monday through Thursday, and talks about alternate daytime activities in social settings. So yeah, it wasn't clear to me whether it was adults, children, but it clearly was organized type activities. It's not just a shelter kind of situation. But yeah, we should hear more information. And I thought the rental over the weekends does make sense and seems appropriate, and sounds like there's a need. So I guess I would be encouraging of him going forward, but we need to hear a lot more specifics.
Brian?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is actually a great use. I agree. Like, we need more details on some of the aspects, but it looks like to me, some of the components regarding the daytime use during the week is a great use for the space. It seems like it's a low number of staff, a low number of individuals being served. The weekend rental seems not only appropriate, but fitting a very significant need in our local community. So I think it's a great idea for the space. But clearly, before we need to be able to move forward, we need a few more pieces of information.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anything else? Any other feedback for Doug before we move on to the next one? Great. Last but definitely not least, 6F. Thank you guys so much for your patience. 6F pre-hearing conference on the request to Discover Family Chiropractic. CO Melissa Murphy for consideration of a zoning permit for a new use at 800 East Broadway, case number 2-015-2021.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Dan, and
sorry.
Oh, yeah, this is my wife Melissa.
Hi.
Hello. Can I share my screen?
Yes, you should have permission to do so.
All right. Well, looks like we got a little bleeding over here. Hold on 1 second. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so my wife Melissa, she's been a chiropractor in the Monona area for about 20 years now, actually. And we're looking at the purchase of the Beltline Animal Hospital at 800 East Broadway. And we'd like to turn it into her chiropractic clinic, but there's definitely more space than she and her partner needs. And so we're considering turning the rest of the space into 1 to 2 leasable spaces. So we haven't made a formal offer to purchase the building yet. We're just investigating right now. So we'd like you to take a look at our rough plans. There's no formal proposal or project plan or estimates or anything like that from the builder that we're working with yet. But we'd like to know, the builder as well had some questions that he wanted us to pose to you. So after we go through this, I'll have a few specific questions, and then I'd just like to get some idea of what things that we should be paying attention to in this project and make sure we include when we do bring this back as a formal proposal. We're working with the Vogel brothers right now. They actually originally built the building. So they're pretty knowledgeable about the building, and they're going to help us with the project plan. So here's some of the business details of Melissa and her partners, her chiropractic clinic. Right now they don't employ office help, but they're not closing off that option entirely. That might happen in the future. They see patients weekdays, typically between 9 and 6 p.m. They have about 20 visitors per day. Deliveries are pretty slow, very small with their practice. The building here, the Beltline Animal Hospital, currently has 12 parking spaces. And then I just have some of the details of who we're working with. So we're working with Joe at Remax as our real estate agent. I mentioned Ryan already at Vogel Brothers. And then for financing, we've been talking to Liz at One Community Bank, and they actually finance some of our residential investment properties that we have. Okay, so the building, currently it's operated by the owner as an animal hospital. There aren't any additional tenants. The upper level is 3,600 square feet. And then there's a lower level that's really not being used for anything other than mechanicals. And there's a large wide open area, and that's about 3,000 square feet. So Melissa would like to change it into about 1/3 of it, her chiropractic clinic, and then the other 2/3 roughly could be turned into 1 to 2 leasable spaces. We see this as kind of 3 phases. The first part, we would get the building to the point where Melissa and Kim, her partner, can use it as their chiropractic clinic. We would do what's necessary to bring the bathroom up to ADA accessible requirements and meet other building codes. And that would be one of the things that we want to make sure we're hearing today. What are the building codes that we need to pay attention to? The parking lot is looking a bit aged right now, so we would seal and restripe that, and then we would need to make changes to signage, both on the face of the building, and also there's I think you called a monument signage or landscape signage on the front of it. So those would all need to be addressed. So here are some rough sketches that we've put together for what this might look like. On the left, you've got the current configuration. We don't need to go into the details too much, I suppose, but basically it's all animal hospital. And then on the right, this is one idea we have. And of course, we're going to be working with Ryan to come up with different options. But really a good chunk of it on the left-hand side here is pretty close to what would work well for Melissa and Kim as a chiropractic office. We would need to expand some of these rooms to be long enough for their use. Right now, they're a little bit too short as veterinary exam rooms, so we'd have to lengthen them a bit. And then on the right-hand side, and this is the area that's pretty open for interpretation, or whatever a tenant needs, we would make decisions on what that looks like when we find tenants for the other open space. But this is one possible option where you have a shared entryway here, and this is shared space, and then they would have their access to their leasable space like that, and maybe they'd share a bathroom. And so those are some of the questions that we'll have there. I guess so we can come back to, so the tenant leasable space would be that phase 2. So we can talk first about just the phase 1. What feedback do you have on just bringing this up to a chiropractic clinic for them?
Okay, great. If you could actually pop your drawings back down, stop sharing. In other words, we can, there we go. then we can open it up to the commission. Thank you. Rob, do you want to start on this one?
Yes, I do. As far as the use, I think it's great. I think it's a perfect use. I don't have a lot of issues with anything except for parking.
Right.
You have 12 spots now. You show a potential configuration where you'd go to maybe 15, it looks like. Just figuring, 2 vehicles for staff, 2 for visitors, 2 in the waiting room, probably 6 is my uneducated estimate at the max you'd need. But you can correct me if I'm wrong there. And then that leaves 9 for other tenants. You don't have a lot of capacity for businesses that are going to come in and drive a lot of traffic to that location. There's no overflow parking. So I don't know, something to consider.
Yeah, that's a concern. Yeah, that we would run out of space a little bit, especially if we ever did finish that basement.
Yeah, if you're talking, yeah. So I don't have any issue with you moving into that space. It's when you come back here to look for new uses, that's where parking could be a real problem.
Right.
As far as the site goes, the proposed improvements, I think that's great. You might want to look at the front entrances. They don't seem to be ADA accessible. I think the stoop looks like there's a pretty good grade coming right off the threshold there on the east side and certainly on the west side entrance.
So to the parking questions, how do the tenants that we're looking for come into play with approval for parking, or is it pretty rigid with, say, I believe it's square footage? How does that work? And like, does that question make sense?
Like, is it 3 spots per 1,000 square feet? Something like that?
I can jump in if that would be helpful.
Sure.
The parking is, the ratio is driven by the use, the proposed use. Typically for a commercial use, it's 1 stall for every 300 square feet of GFA, gross floor area. So the 3,000, as proposed, would be the 10 stalls, and so I think that's just a good indicator. Were the basement discussion to come into play, the scaling of the parking is the big the big discussion point there. So typically, depending upon the phasing and how this were to play out, an additional tenant would need to come through for a zoning permit, similar to how this is, how your application would be processed. And so each parking or each use would be reviewed sort of on a macro level, with the parking being one element of that discussion.
Okay.
And actually, as a follow-up to that, I would just say that in reality, it wouldn't be the parking that's the issue. It's going to be your ability to rent, because this commission can't just waive off those parking requirements, and because we have a responsibility, obviously, to those standards. And so it's just to say, I think it would make it more difficult for you in terms of finding tenants that aren't going to need parking, because there really isn't, we don't have flexibility there to just say, oh, well, they're nice people, or they need a tenant. We really have to be, or we like the whatever business they might be want to run there. We have to pay attention to that parking.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that with 15 stalls, we would be up to the 4,500 square feet of usable space, basically. Is that the right way to interpret it?
I would say so. I mean, it's probably the minimum, you know, depending upon use and, you know, just as was mentioned, the lack of kind of overflow. It is, you know, the code does say for it to sort of be self-contained on the site. So, you know, bike racks and things like that can help, but obviously with the location, I do think accommodating the parking and being mindful of that as you think about the future tenanting would be important.
Right.
Okay. All right, I mean, that gets into some of our next slides here. So I'm going to share again for a moment. You can find the right place. Wait, not that one. Okay, so we've already talked about this. Questions about like, I had a couple questions from Ryan at Vogel Brothers. He wanted to know if it was acceptable to have a single restroom for two tenants if we ended up breaking it out into two tenants. Is that something that you look at or approve, or is that not important to the planning commission?
Doug?
I would say that's typically more of a building inspector and a plan review type item. I would say generally the commission would look at the operation of the building as a whole and maybe how you plan for the multiple tenants, you know, the access and things like that. You know, is it one door, is it two entrances, things like that. But I can certainly, after this meeting, I can put you in touch with the building inspector who would have standard code, commercial code requirements that he would have in place for those types of elements.
Okay. Okay. When it comes to the entrance, I mean, are there any issues with a shared entrance like that? Is that also a building inspector question?
I would say that one is both. It would be to the commission as well to sort of consider the flow of the building from more of a high level, but certainly more of a, you know, more scrutiny would come from the building inspector in terms of, again, the codes that would need to be followed and such. But I do think part of this zoning permit application, there is the phased approach here as to how that may, how you may receive potential approvals as part of that. But I do think considering, you know, how this may work with multiple tenants, maybe different hours of operation, things like that, how each element of the building may be secured if one has weekend hours, things like that. So I think some of the higher level discussions would maybe come as part of this zoning permit with the real details determined by the building inspector.
Okay. So is this a point where you'd like to discuss again? I know we kind of branched into this before, or should I continue on and talk a little bit about, granted, the parking is definitely one of the biggest concerns here. But if we were to build out some of that lower level, that would be the last piece to talk about. Should we go to that?
Sure. Yeah, you can certainly go to that.
Okay. Oh, that's right. I did want to ask about emergency exits. Is that that's a building inspector question though, I suppose?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the last part, there is, like I said, there's that lower level that has a lot of nice open space. I think Melissa was envisioning something like even renting it out to a yoga instructor, something along that line, because it's very nice and open. So to access that lower level, we would expect something like we would either need an elevator or an ADA compliant ramp. Is there feedback on that? Is that accurate? What are your thoughts on if we were to go that route.
I can jump in. I would say there would certainly be ADA requirements to account for. I believe the elevator would obviously be the higher cost option, but would also potentially should satisfy the ADA requirements for access between the levels. Again, the big component would be the range of uses. Something I haven't mentioned yet is something if one of the tenants, if there was not to be overlap, for example, other shared tenant buildings, if there's a weekend use or an evening use with others that occur during the day, that could be beneficial at least for that tenant, for the parking discussion, such that it may not be that there can be a little bit of flexibility if there's not to be overlap. We've seen that on Monona Drive, for example. But that is, again, it's a pretty specific requirement as you think about the additional tenants on the ground, on the main floor, as well as into the lower level. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to give an example of that, if there was, because you mentioned yoga, if you rented to someone who was interested in a lower space that was a yoga person who was only going to be there in the evenings and the weekends and wasn't there while Kim was there doing her practice.
Right.
Then obviously that would, your 6 cars would not be on site and would therefore leave that parking space for that, in a sense, for that, when that other tenant operates. That's what Doug is referring to. But again, and so we have provided some flexibility in those instances, but we do have to be attentive to it otherwise. But again, that would be something you want to think about when you think about tenants.
How many handicap accessible spots do we need to keep? Is that based on the size of the building?
I believe that it is. It's going to be certainly 1, if not 2, for that size of the parking. I would have to check.
I think there's 2 now.
Yeah, I think with the ratio with the 12 stalls, it's I think the 2 would be required. But I would have to double check. And again, most likely it would scale if there were plans to expand the parking, then, and potentially a second entrance. They're all things to kind of consider, accessible routes, proximate to the entries, things like that.
Okay. Yeah, and this is the diagram for the current lower level. There's some mechanicals here, there's mechanicals here, but this space outlined in the middle is all open. And so that's the space that we're talking about. Okay, and then, yeah, this is the last slide where I laid out a possible way to expand the parking, because this space right here on the left is kennels. It's just kennels that are partially open to the outside. And so that's not space that we'd really need to use. And so we could take that out and replace with additional parking spaces. So I think we don't really need to go into the permits. It sounds like that's something that we can talk about it later when we get farther down the line. Yeah, that's really the end of my specific questions. So is there any other feedback that you have for us?
Yeah, there's a couple of folks that haven't had a chance to speak yet, so I would want to open it up to the rest of the commissioners. So Brian?
Yeah, I think this is an excellent use of the space. I welcome kind of a new kind of envision for that location. The phased approach is a great idea. I think it's been pointed out when you get to some of those different kind of turning points regarding, are we going to open up the lower level? Are we going to expand that? Are we going to look at kind of adding additional parking? You're spot on. Like, we need to know so many more details. I know you've been sitting on this meeting all night, so you've heard, like signs tonight were the issue. Oftentimes parkings are issue. And like those two pieces are like big on our mind to make sure that we're really addressing with property owners as they're looking at how do we do things differently. And we want to make sure that, you know, people know where you are and they can get there and they can park. So I think you've heard a lot through tonight's meeting that will give you good feedback.
So my one question, so I was under the impression when you lease a space, I didn't know you have to get permission to allow people to lease your space. So we kind of have to come back and say, hey, these two acupuncturists want to lease this space and get permission and give someone a heads up they'd take up another 6 spots or whatever. Is that?
Yeah, so typically the document you'd be looking for in the city is the zoning permit, which is what your proposal would be working through, but also assuming, you know, if the tenants were, if you had another tenant potentially lined up, then, you know, for the potential consideration, the more formal element, you could potentially bundle those two together. But for a new tenant coming in, you know, a change in use or a vacancy for 6 months or more would also necessitate, you know, zoning permit reviews. So a good example is, you know, if it's a restaurant and then another tenant comes along and it's another restaurant, same use, like for like, then that can you know, proceed with no need for a zoning permit. But if it changed from a restaurant to a retail use or a medical office, for example, that change necessitates it. So high level here, because it's going from animal hospital to you know, more of a medical office, then that would be necessitated. But also, if the tenants are not viewed as part of the initial application, those additional subdivisions would be needed, would need zoning permit review as well.
If you were renting space within your building to somebody, in other words, if you were to take on other other practice members, in the same way that if a hair salon rents chairs, if you were to rent rooms to somebody and all of a sudden it became chiropractic and acupuncture services as in total as one business. So you were in charge, you're the owner of that business, and you had different things within your business. I mean, again,
yeah,
then that would be different because it would be your business and you would just have employees then, right? That just had a different specialty that you had as a medical office, essentially.
Okay.
But if you're talking about, you know, an entirely different type of business, then as Doug said, it's we have to see it.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
So let's see. So Susan.
I don't really have anything to add. I think it's a great project. It's exciting. I think it's a good use. And it does sound to me like parking is the only issue. And that's an issue for you to consider, I guess, when you consider the viability of you're taking this on and you consider what reasonable options you'd have for the other building. I think if you have one entrance door like that, that may indicate more of a business, more of an like acupuncture might work well and something like that. Just because they don't have the visibility of separate entrances. So you're sort of already, it seems to me, limiting it to something that wouldn't require a lot of parking, but it's going to require some, and then especially at the lower level. So I think that's for you guys to think through how this will work for you. But
yeah, and how to play into the financials, and can we cover the mortgage with her business and with yeah. So.
Well, I would just echo what Brian said, which is, if we're not talking about signs, we're often talking about parking. And it's always a challenge. And, and we hear all the time and, well, if we put another bike rack or if we have, something else can we not, can we let go of, because people like to bike in Madison, I mean, we hear it. And honestly, we'd love to go there. We'd love to say it doesn't matter, but as Brian said, our interest is your clients being happy and your business succeeding. And we know from experience that if we don't pay attention to that parking, that it will only come back to hurt you and ultimately hurt the city because unfortunately not everybody's on a bike or sharing a car or whatever now. So we have to be attentive to that.
Right.
So otherwise, great. It sounds like from this group, we think it's a great use. You just have a lot of things to consider, Chris.
Yeah, I just want to chime in. The first thing I'm going to say is great job on your presentation. I've never had people that really don't know what to expect and aren't sure what they're looking for come in with such a thorough questioning and presentation. So well-researched, kudos. First word out of my mouth after that'll be parking. Everybody else has said it. That's one reason we look at floor plans is if you were to put 4 rooms in there for chiropractic manipulations, you probably wouldn't have enough parking.
Right.
I don't know how your practice works. I know when I go to my chiropractor, there's 2 people waiting in the rooms. There's usually 1 or 2 more in the waiting room, and he can easily have 4 for his single practice. He can easily have 4 cars waiting. So that's why it's important for us to look at uses. So I'm not sure you really understand. I mean, you're not drawing the line till tonight, but what we look at is we give a permit for uses and we look at if the use is compatible. Number one, I should say your practice be perfect down there. There's no issues for me for chiropractic clinic there, but we also look at the site a lot. We look at parking. We look at your floor plan for the things we're talking about. A lot of the questions you have are building issues. And although our building inspector is a good resource, those are actually questions your architect should have all the answers to. When you ask about the bathrooms, it'll depend on the number of people that are in the building. If you go over a certain number of people, it's a state building code, and we're on a unified building code now. So all the building codes within the state are the same. And your builder would have to get a building permit to be able to build this. And that's why the architect there would know all the regulations, just like Rob would know all the regulations for site design and landscaping. So that's why we're kind of like, well, we don't deal with that. As you add more people, you're going to have more exiting requirements. It'll depend on how far it is to an exit. So when you cut this building up, now you're creating more obstructions. So that'll be, again, a question for your builder for exiting, but we will still look at it. If you go in there and say, well, I want to put an acupuncturist, but they're going to have 3 rooms they can work in, we probably say, well, wait a minute, that, we're not sure you have enough parking. We're not sure the site can support that. So that's why it's important for us to see those types of things. Now, it really gets different when you open up the basement, because now you open yourself up to more exiting requirements are all building code issues, but you've also opened us up to that big P word again, that parking. And I think you're really going to find that you're going to start to struggle. And as the chair alluded to, if you have problems with parking, it hurts your business.
Right.
I mean, we look at it, and hopefully we have enough experience over all the years we've looked at this that we kind of have a feel for what you may or may not need. So when you look at our code, and I know, Dan, you were looking and said, okay, so it's 1 per 300. That's a guide to start at. That's all that is. It said, generally for a normal place, and the example I'll give you is you could lease out the other one to a telephone call center. They could put 12 cubicles in there. Well, you don't have the parking for that, right?
Right.
And so at that point, we would say, we're going to save you from yourself. You can't do this, even though they're going to pay you a lot of rent. So I hope that helps a little bit. But the clear message you need for tonight is that the commissioners that are here, it's been unanimous. That's a great use. We'd love to see you be able to work something out. Keep an eye to parking. Keep an eye to parking, because it only hurts you if you don't have adequate parking. And that building, if you split it up into 2 more uses, you're going to start hitting that wall for if you have enough parking.
Right.
Yeah. So
I will say Kim and I are both moms, and we both work part-time. So on Tuesday, I'm on my own. On Wednesday, she's on her own, and we kind of stagger. So that could be helpful. But as our kids get older, we might want to work a little more. But yeah, so there's, right now, we do stagger our hours quite a bit.
And the issue we as a commission have, of course, is once we've said that's appropriate zoning, that's appropriate use for that building, we can't change it when somebody else comes in and says, well, we got 2 people working full time. We'll have 3 people lined up and we'll have 2 rooms for our manipulations and run back and forth. And all of a sudden you have a parking thing. So that's why, as much as we think this is a great use, we're still throwing that P word around. Be careful about your parking and look at what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Sure.
One more question about signage. Is a monument sign okay there? Or am I going to have to do the single letter?
Every use in Monona is allowed a monument sign or a landscape ground sign. And
Okay.
I believe there's one there right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, we have ordinance as far as how big it can be. It needs to be landscaped, how far it needs to be from the road. But I believe, Doug, that existing sign is in full compliance.
It appears to be, yes. Yeah, it's well set back.
And you hear us talk about signage a lot because everybody always thinks, well, if I get my sign a little bit bigger than everybody else, they'll notice me. And we're always like, oh, come on. And we have so many ordinance over signs because everybody wants to have the biggest, brightest, flashiest sign so that everybody knows where they are. And we try to keep it so everybody's on the same scale, on the same playing field for signage. Make it so they know who you are, but let's not go crazy.
Yeah. I know that those single letter signs are expensive though. So I'm glad I wouldn't need those.
Oh, I'm not saying you wouldn't need to. You mean the individual lit channel letters?
Yeah.
I don't recall what's on the building right now, to be honest.
It's not.
Nothing's lit.
No.
It's just plaques. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just
we strongly encourage the individual channel lit letters. Individual lit channel mounted. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. And I'll leave it at that. They've come down a lot with LED lighting. They're so much more affordable and they're so much more reliable. Back when they had to put fluorescent tubes and things in them, they were much more expensive.
Okay.
Any other feedback? Any other questions, you guys? From the applicant? Or do we?
No more questions.
Okay. Great. Well, again, we thank you for coming in. All good questions, and I hope we were helpful in you thinking about your next steps. And you know, we'll look forward to. Yeah, Chris.
I'm sorry, another thought just came to me, and everybody will tell you I just got one last question. We do have new fire ordinance in Monona since I believe that building was built. So I don't know if that would change with a new use. If it would have to be sprinkled, I'm sure it would at least have to be monitored. And that again would be a question for the fire marshal, Doug. But I know it's changed since that building was built, and I don't recall the size requirements for sprinklers. My guess is if you decide to do the basement, it would certainly put you over the top where you'd have to do sprinklers.
Yeah. I think we knew that too.
Okay.
Because it was built in like 86. And there's a lot of code to catch up on.
Great. Well, thanks again for coming, and thanks for your patience and waiting.
Thanks for putting up with some rookies. So appreciate it.
Yeah, I know. Very much appreciate you coming, and we hope to see you back. Hope you can work something out.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Night, everyone.
All right. Good night.
Bye.
That takes us to number 7, reports of staff and commission members, staff report.
Thank you. So I'll kind of roll these together. We, just as a economic development update, expecting something, discussions continue for the Old National Bank site, right at the corner there of West Broadway and Monona Drive. Hoping for a commercial application to come through. There's a couple discussions kind of ongoing in the background here. That has been vacant since Old National decided to close that location. So that I would expect to see something hopefully in the next couple of months coming through Plan Commission for that. Upcoming item, I do expect that we will have a mixed-use development on Monona Drive. I can't reveal the location just yet, but coming through most likely within the next month. I think things are getting pretty pretty close to sort of being ready for a pre-hearing discussion. And so that would be, most likely either the 28th may be a little close, but the July 12th meeting that may well make an appearance. So things moving forward for that. And I would also just like to point out the discussion of the return to in-person meetings with the lifting of the restrictions. We're posing this to each of our committees and commissions. And so the possibility of returning to pre-pandemic normal of the library, the municipal room, looking to see consensus and comfort levels for doing so.
All those in favor of returning to in-person?
I'm fine.
I would be okay with it.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be good, except how will I do lacrosse practice, hockey practice, and cooking dinner?
I want to see a seating chart too before I commit.
Yeah.
Put me on the other side of the room. That'd be all right. I don't care.
No, Rob and Chris stay on that side.
I was going to say, do we even remember where we sit anymore?
Yeah. Well, not surprising, but the commission members with family, I'm sure, struggle a bit more with this, right? Am I right about that, Brian, Rob? And I know Alder Goforth has said the same thing. I mean, it's not that she doesn't want to be in person, but there's obviously with 2 young kids at home, sometimes it's more challenging.
No, actually being in person actually makes it easier, in my opinion.
Okay. So, we'll take that in advisement. I think the mayor was talking about mid-July as maybe the second meeting in July is when the council would go back.
Okay.
Then is what she and Brian were talking about.
Let me, I'll coordinate with the library director as well. I know each building has its own policies, and I know the library still has some restrictions in place. So I'll just want to confirm what a potentially a June 28th meeting. It may be a little early for that, but possibly, most likely the July 12th. But I'll certainly keep the commission updated.
Yeah, and I also think that there's one of the things that I know the council and Brian has been struggling with is that there's not really a good hybrid option at this point. I think initially people were, were thinking, oh, it'll be so easy to go to a hybrid. So if some people don't, can't make it, they can, but there just isn't, So that's the other thing I know that the mayor and city administrator have been wrestling with. So, we can be patient if it's not immediate, but let's look to, once you find out the information from
definitely
the library and from Brian in terms of when the city council's going back, et cetera, we can decide.
That sounds good.
Well, and one of the pieces, like, we've never frowned upon people being able to call in by a cell phone.
That's right.
So, I mean, as long as people have the materials, like, calling in would just be fine.
Yeah, except for the one thing about calling in is that, and I know somebody who has used the Star Dock before it in the municipal room, is that everybody needs to be able to hear whoever it is that's calling in. And I know at least with city council meetings that I know it was sometimes challenging for people on either end of the table to actually hear the person that was on the Star Dock. So anyway, it's just, we can definitely manage it and we'll look to manage it. But it's just to say that putting somebody up on the Zoom screen as a hybrid doesn't work.
Well, and as Rebecca would say, you're going to have to place me closer to the speakerphone, apparently.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why, but
yeah,
apparently.
Yes, apparently. Yeah, Susan.
Well, there is a program you can use where you can come in on like a Skype kind of thing, and it's not Zoom, but it's on a screen, but it's an extra amount of work. The district has some ability to do that. We've done it in the past, but it's a challenge, and it would be more work for Will, I think, to set that up. So,
Right.
And I don't even know if you have the equipment, so it is more difficult to have somebody come in. I think either on phone or on a screen. So.
Right. Exactly. Right. And since we've gone to recording all of the meetings, it probably is less applicable to this meeting since we've always recorded these meetings. And for the city council, which we've also always recorded. But we've recently made a commitment to record all of our meetings. And so when we're talking across the board, there's no question it would be cost prohibitive because we don't have media there, community media at every single meeting. So anyway, we'll tackle that bridge when we get to it, and hopefully that's very soon. Yes, Chris.
Well, I just have to say, I think there was an expectation when each of us accepted this appointment that we would be able to be there in person, because there is definitely a different dynamic with the applicant, a different dynamic amongst us when we're all in the same room.
Right.
I would agree. Yeah.
Completely agree. Yep. I agree. So any other, and it looks like obviously June 28th is no longer tentative if for no other reason that we need to see the current back. Yes.
You're muted, Doug.
Did I hear that? June 28th is canceled? Is that?
Sorry, yes, I was agreeing with the current would at least be the one application on there. So should not be as full of a package.
Okay, short meeting.
Yes.
I emailed you, but I will be out the 12th July.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Plan commission requests for information from Doug? Anything else this evening? Chris?
Yes, I just, based on the conversation tonight, I think we should, perhaps, Doug, you could ask the police chief and fire chief. I think it would behoove us to be requiring Knox boxes on most of these buildings that come up. I know we had an event a year or two ago at our building where a fire alarm got triggered and it wasn't a real thing, but there they were. And, my brother and I were trying to throw our clothes on to get up there. And after that, we voluntarily cut lock boxes into both office buildings we own on Monona Drive. It's a cheap thing to do, and it provides awesome access for emergency services. So perhaps if you could talk to the fire chief in particular, but probably bring the police chief in too and see what their feedback is on that. It's a very inexpensive thing, and I think something we should be requiring on a lot of these because it's a life and health issue.
Definitely, and they when I share with department heads, they're included. But I think just with the volume of what's been coming through, it may get lost in the shuffle. So certainly for a consideration, we'll look to coordinate and just talk to them about best practice as well.
Yeah, I was surprised to not see somebody say we'd want one on there for Floor and Decor.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you,
Chris. I actually thought Knox boxes were required on all businesses.
Yeah,
they're not. And I think it gets to be a certain size and they do it. And it's such a cheap thing to do. And emergency responders, 5 minutes can make all the difference.
Right.
Yeah, we should go back to public safety. I swear when I was back on chair, we reviewed that code and we added, because we did, what was it? I don't remember the code, but like we were at 13 and then there was 13 plus, which requires sprinklers and certain components and Knox boxes on all businesses.
Well, perhaps that's something the building inspector has been requiring. I don't know about, or we don't know about, but we should just make sure.
Definitely.
I'm on public safety, and I was happy to bring it there because it certainly seemed. But we should definitely look at and see if it's already been done, Brian. As you think, if it already hasn't, maybe it's just because we've had a turnover at both chiefs or whatever, that they're not necessarily noticing it when they're reviewing it.
Or maybe building inspection is just requiring it. We don't know.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. The other part to add in is it was like the fire protection. I can't remember what the code is. Like we were expecting an additional code above. The one level was sufficient, and it had to do with like multi-residence, units within a building of when you need to sprinkle versus not. But yeah, good things to take up, and I'm glad you're there, Nancy. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, well, you guys, this might even be a new record, or close to a new record. So thank you again for your counsel and for slogging through a long meeting, but yet productive meeting. I'm sorry that we didn't have a quorum in some instances, but can't be helped. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 The meeting is adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.
All right.